making our project of building a non-racial society difficult, and it might undermine the entire National Democratic Revolution ideal of building that society, and therefore we did call for tougher and stiffer sentences, if not in existence, and ensure therefore that perpetrators can then be dealt with. Then on the issue of those who fought for the liberation, yes, the program of the exhumations, repatriations, and burials have recently been adopted by the cabinet. We took note of that in the conference, that the program is welcomed. We will then be engaging families to educate and make them aware of the processes and what the policy says, and helping them, those who may want their families to come in. It's not going to be an easy thing. Where the graves are marked, it's going to be easy. Where graves are known, definitely it's going to be easy. However, there are those who are in shallow graves, as we have said in Angola, when they were attacked by then the UNITA rebel forces. They were left just in ditches whilst running away from the enemy attack. And they are not marked. So we didn't know who is who in that. But there is also an engagement that we also noted in the conference between the Arts and Culture, Department of Justice, and the Departments of Defense, who will then be also going to look at the program of the repatriations en masse, where the army is proposing that we just go into those countries where we know that these marked graves, and then we then exhume. Obviously, we need to do all the DNA test and so forth before, and then bring them all home. But family says, we want to get involved. We don't just go and exhume and bring and say, call us in Pretoria when the remains have arrived. We will want to be there to perform certain rituals. As an African way of life, we cannot undermine it, so that we could then begin to look at that particular issue. But we are still engaging with the defense around that modality, so that we don't just exhume and the families then start complaining tomorrow. But in the army, we are just saying one flight, you exhume, you bring everybody, and then the families interact with the remains already in the country. And family says, no, we cannot do so. But those that are doable will do so. But also we have to engage with the country's laws, like in Uganda. They don't want anybody to be exhumed there. They say it's the country's law. So also, when we do it, we'll have to engage government to government, and then where the law does not permit, obviously have that understanding and negotiate and see, and then probably the families will also understand that there are those countries that will say no, and then there are those countries that say it's fine. But even those that are saying fine, they say leave at home, and that marks and say here was so and so, he has been exhumed back home, so that we live dignity, even in their own countries. Don't leave ditches and holes of exhumed grave sites and so forth. So all those nitty-gritties are going to be harmonized in the program and guidelines that we'll be developing, so that it becomes a smooth process. So from the resolution itself, and also from the cabinet policy guides, we'll then have to look at those issues so that we harmonize, and then we can then really bring those that the families demands to come back. And there are those, obviously, who are in the forest, like in Zimbabwe, Basel, February, and then that forest, unfortunately, is becoming a suburb. People are building beautiful houses in Zimbabwe, South Zimbabwe, and then they have been indicating to us that if you don't remove those graves there, they will end up somebody building on top of them. So we were also engaging with the countries. They are also engaging with us. And within this program, once we have cleared on those guidelines, it will then go in an uninterrupted way, except for those, obviously, the graves that do not have names. Is going to be a difficult one. And we'll engage the families and really explain to them. But in Angola, luckily, they've already preserved the area. It's a garden of memory, and families can just go in there and say, at least one of our remains is one of those graves they can point out, and it's a very beautiful sight for families really to see that they have been honored, and the honoring is what we also want to see happening across those countries where we can bring them back. And when they come back, then, which is the last point around this, we have said that the provinces and the national must have a national heroes arca as a resolution. And at the national level, a site has been identified next to Freedom Park. We just have to go and engage with the municipalities, the province of Gauteng, and say, this site was indicated as a national heroes acre. Can we now begin to prepare it so that it could then receive those that are declared as national heroes and then to come and be buried there? In the provinces, they must also do the same, have the provincial heroes acre, because currently people are being exhumed, they have been taken to the rural areas, their villages, and once they are there, well, their status gets reduced. And then when you go to the graves, you will then find something else. And whereas if they're in a hero's acre, there will be that care, maintenance, and honor that these are the freedom fighters who fought for our freedom, and children and the next generation will keep on honoring them for that. And the last point was the issue of the separation of the departments of sports and then arts and culture to have 2 DGs. We are looking at it national because in the provinces, the challenge is that the MECs are limited to 10. And then we can know that, therefore, in the provinces will not interfere with that process where one MEC will have 3 departments or 4 departments, and we cannot, unfortunately, at that level, be able then to do. However, the national program and the provincial programs will work together to ensure that we're able, because the national law will be one, and theirs is to implement and then be able then to ensure, therefore, that we're able then to respond to this call and the request which the conference has given us a mandate now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bra Ops. We have dealt with all of the questions. We'll take the, okay, Matobo, you'll have to guide us. Okay, we are now taking peace and stability. Okay, thanks, Bra Ops. You are released. You are taking, we'll take all of, after peace and stability, we'll take communications and the battle of ideas. Can we file after the communications? Can we do it? So I suggest we do the ones we have now, and then you can file. And then we'll wait for ETC and IR. Okay. So it's education, health,
science and technology.
Science and technology. Okay, that's fine. So what we'll do is that we'll do peace and stability now, and then we'll do communications and battle of ideas. Then we'll do communications.
Yes,
or we'll start with education, health, and science and technology, and then from there we'll do communications and battle of ideas, and we'll do IR and ETC. Okay, over to you, Comrade Klobos.
No, thank you very much, Comrade Bule, and thanks to Comrade Umamtandi Modise. We are reporting on the outcomes of the final conference resolution. Myself and Comrade Mamtandi, we then will be able to respond to issues. The national conference, after we presented our report and our report was engaged, was divided into 3 parts. One of the parts was to look at the environmental conditions, both globally, in our own continent, in our own region in SADC, and also at domestically, which is within our country. There was also an opportunity to look at the progress made, because we had to measure the implementation of the policies, the strides that we've made, but also our failures or the incomplete work. And on the basis of that, then the conference had to reaffirm the conference resolution taken on peace and stability in the 54th National Conference and strengthen some of them. On the first aspect is that when we looked at the issues that were there, globally we were able to continue to look that the situation is more problematic than before. The escalation of the Ukraine-Russian conflict in the main, led by the US and the Europeans using NATO, has caused a lot of a negative impact in terms of global supply chain instability, including the geopolitical tensions that have arisen. We have also looked at the East, the situation between the USA and China, and the impact thereof. And we're also starting to look at the impact that it has for us as African continent, especially on the issues of food security, issues of energy crisis, and a number of impacts, and also the imposition of the unilateral sanctions that the United States of America has imposed with the European partners and other members of NATO. But also we have noted that those sanctions were not imposed by the United Nations, including the issue of the advent of a legislation in the United States where those countries that are being seen that they are interacting with the Russian Federation, then the US has decided on a bill that is called Countering Malign Russian Activities Bill. And it's starting to put a lot of strain because countries are being bullied. And conference was very clear that we can't be bullied. We're a sovereign state. We can choose our friends. And our position is now that we are very comfortable with the issues of what is happening there. The attitude of the ANC that resolution must be resolved. And the parties to the conflict, they must come to the table because all these issues, even when generals they fight, but ultimately they must come and sign a peace deal through the issues of negotiations. And the very same issues that unilateralism that is happening, including the issues of protectionism that is happening around the issues of the economy, must be dealt with. We also look at the issues of the pandemics that are coming through. Those are some of the issues that we're looking at. In Africa, we are more worried about the situation, especially in the western part of Africa, also in the issues, when you look at Central Africa, the issues of peace and stability. In the West, also the issues of the emergence of the coup d'etats. And some of these people, they don't want to go back to elections. The issues of the ongoing terrorism that is happening in the number of areas that are happening here. In our own region, when we thought that we're getting more stable, progress is being made to deal with the extremists that are actually in Mozambique under the leadership of SADC, and there's a deployment of our own soldiers under the guidance of the President and Minister of Defense there. And we think that situation should actually be managed. But the risks are very high because South Africa, on the basis of our compliance, that we can't become a home for and a haven for planning, for execution, and also the issues of funding of terrorism activities. We are very pleased to say that we've managed to conclude that legislation, and the President has signed that legislation into law. Domestically, we are having a number of challenges. Crime and violence in our own country has become increasingly a greater problem. Many communities are living in fear. They are worried about a number of criminal activities, and the statistics indicate. An example is gangsterism, the numbers of armed robberies, the issues of rape, murder. Even this issue of ESCOM is causing problems because the levels of burglary is happening because these criminals, they know when this thing is happening. The issues of women and children, especially vulnerable to violence that is perpetrated amongst them by people they know and men, is the biggest problem. Other problems we looked at was the issue of serious criminal syndicates, both here at home and transnational, around issues of attacks of infrastructure and vandalism. You could see the escalation of the stealing of copper, the ferrous and non-ferrous material, taking it to the other countries, and the issues of illegal mining and illicit mining, both in terms of safety, but in terms of our infrastructure, but also in terms of our revenue. The construction mafia and the extortion in terms of many construction sites where projects are not being concluded, the issues of corruption, illicit economy, and the issues of high cost of securing businesses. That's the issues that we looked at, that this is an environment we're in. We know that government must still do more so that South Africans, they can be in a position to feel safe and do some of those issues. On progress made, we have noted that government, when it comes to the restoration of the capability and the professionalization of the security cluster, is work in progress. Now the coordination has been improved. There is a National Security Council, and the National Strategic is chaired by the President. Various ministries are sitting there. In other words, there is a proper coordination of our activities. The National Security Strategy Plan for our country has also been considered by the National Security Council, and we were very content. We are on the final stages where Cabinet must be able to approve it, so that at least there is this clear blueprint on how to deal with issues of security in our country for implementation purposes. Various organizations, Comrade Pule, whether it is the police, the stabilization on the top is there now. There's a proper leadership. You go to State Security Agency, you look at the issues of the NPA and the other agencies. There is a stability at the top, but there's still more work that must be done in terms of increasing capacity, especially the people that need to do issues on the ground. You actually could see that the police have been given a team of youngsters that just recently in December, they came in on board, they are recruiting more. Those are some of the things that we have noted, that there is a stabilization of the system. But there's still more work that needs to be done around the intelligence capability, so that in terms of early warning system, issues of preventions, we're able to respond. One of the biggest matters we've been accused of is in our ability to handle the issues for those issues that are related to the TRC. And we need to be able to report that there's a lot of progress that is being made in terms of the dedicated capacity that the NPA has looked at, and at the very same time in terms of following up those prosecutions, some of them are being enrolled. There are difficulties because these matters have been there over time, and some of these matters, if you deal with them in terms of inquest and so forth, bring them to the courts, it takes time. But the task team around missing persons, so that we know the mortal remains of our loved one and those who fought for freedom and justice in our land, that work is going in there. Mamtandi will also add more on that particular issue, but in terms of providing resources to deal with those issues, it's important. We have not dealt with other matters that have to deal with issues of the TRC. One of the biggest issues that we looked at, and the resolutions have been made, is the management of migration, which is a world phenomenon. The movement of people happens everywhere. There are positives and negatives. The conference has agreed that our movement is not xenophobic. The ANC is not xenophobic. And South Africans are not xenophobic. But there are incidents. There are incidents where certain people are being targeted because of their nationality, that they are non-national, and in the main targeting Africans. And we have said that the ANC policy position remains that we promote integration, especially economic reintegration of our people. But at the very same time, we need to ensure that the issues that have to deal with the movement of persons in between our own countries must be properly regulated. We don't want a depopulation of our neighboring states. But at the very same time, we can't say people who are not South African must not come here. But it must be a matter that is being managed properly. Therefore, on the issues of the BMA, the cluster is working well. The first co-ops of about 200 guards have already been deployed, but additional capacity is being looked at, 400. And additional 400 that we are going to be bringing in, but also the capability to use ICT in terms of how do we manage our borders, and the possibility that we need to overhaul our legislation so that we can start to have the refugee centers or asylum seekers next to the border controls, but manage those issues. On the police, we are very happy that they have been able to revive the task teams. The task team, you could see the issues of illegal minings, they were coming up, but the task team have started working even with mines, private security, the issues that have to deal with other matters. There is some work, but we still feel that there's still more work to be done. On the defense, the issues of Daniel going back to defense, the decision has been made. We want that the modalities for the implementation must move with speed, but we also want defense to be at the cutting edge of R&D and innovation. The issues of Young Innovators Program is the right direction so that we can be able, defense, it can not only be about the defense of our sovereignty, but it can also be at the cutting edge of other issues, and also the use of the defense industry to be able to deal, also defense to be used around issues in our own country, around infrastructure development, other issues to be supporting the police, but also the issue around military veterans in terms of housing, they are looking at that. Then there was the biggest issue, is an internal matter of looking at military veterans. The ANC noted the work that has been done in terms of bringing all military veterans under one umbrella, which is Umkhonto weSizwe Liberation War veterans, but we know that there are still those that are not within the fold of MK Liberation War veterans, and conference is directed that they must all be brought together. But at the very same time, the Department of Military Veterans must attend to the issues that are relevant to them. Those were the issues that we thought we should be able to raise. Around crime and corruption, the multi-agency fighting corruption agency has been supported by conference. It's a resolution. The state must work on the modalities so that the independence, but also the effectiveness, where law must be applied fairly without any fear or favor or contradiction. The issues of criminality that are either done by private sector or by those who are deployed in the public service. The ANC has resolved that there must be speedy prosecution in dealing with those particular issues without any fear or favor or prejudice, but at the very same time, the organization internally must deal with those issues of integrity and morality. And then on issues of communities, we also agreed that communities, we must revive the structures. The ANC alone, without having communities being involved, we will never be able to win the battle against crime and corruption. The issues of street committees, block committees, the issues of CPFs and how they need to be supported, some of those particular, the platforms that we're looking at, the issues of harmonization and the integration, especially around the police, the metros, law enforcement agencies, including private security. We have said that those measures must also be taken. To conclude, Comrade Pule is on the issue of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, it has become one of the biggest threats that countries they face, and South Africa is not immune. Therefore, the issues of cybersecurity-related legislation, we have said that they must be finalized. We have also said that our own capabilities for various sectors, the state must be able to look at those particular issues, but also the issues of securing of the cyberspace, especially led by the Department of Defense, because cyber wars are currently happening in terms of the issues of the space. And then on migration, we agreed that the laws are being overhauled. All the migration laws will engage with the United Nations so that we can be able to put certain conditions around the ascension that we did make. But at the very same time, our view remains, Africa remains one, we must integrate, and our policy on migration is also informed by our international relations policy and our relations in terms of what is our national interest around SADC, around certain blocks in the region, around BRICS, the EU, and whether it's G20, whether it's G77 plus China. Those are the issues that, in the main, that conference, they have actually supported all our recommendations from the National Policy Conference, the conference itself, but they are demanding implementation. At this stage, I will ask Comrade Pule 1 or 2 minutes for Umama to deal with this matter because It's a matter that we've been seen as noting it over time.
There's a matter, and a question arose from the floor on the repatriation of the military veterans' remains. This matter is under discussion between the Department of Military Veterans and Arts and Culture. We differ in approach. We will finalize our approaches. We are agreeing with families whose family members are still out there. And when we have concluded our discussions, we will actually be addressing this matter. We also think that the approach taken has also been, the reason the whole process has been sluggish is that the way we've been going is it's too harrowing, it's too time consuming, it also eats up the resources. We would like to repatriate our own veterans back. And that we think we can do in a quicker and more effective way. We also have in-house capabilities for identification and all the forensics as defense. So we want to put that paid together with dealing with all the other issues of military vets. You will have noticed that in most, we referred to MK Liberation War veterans as now being recognized in the ANC family as the sole representatives of former Mkhonto we Sizwe combatants. But we must also say that this is not the disunity amongst the military vets, must also be understood in the context of the former people involved in any way in the military family, especially those who were not in the former statutory militaries of the apartheid system, that it is an issue usually over the lack of the resources. And that is why you have tensions and the split in the Cape Corps colored military veterans. You have had that within the APLA, a split. And therefore, when you really dig deep, we do need to use the South African SAMVA, Military Veterans Association, to bring back every military vet, sit down, and begin to refocus and do what is good for all the military vets of South Africa. I also thought that, Comrade Mahlobo, we should say that we also, as the Peace and Stability Commissions, looked at the issues of integration at local government. And that is why we came up with a recommendation that said we would like to see leadership of the people, and I don't want to call them foreigners when they have spent a lot of time amongst us, but non-South African communities and South African communities coming together, having dialogues, us being able to identify those who are running businesses, because again, even if we want to play dumb and not address those issues and take some of the niggling issues head on, they cause a problem. You cannot have a situation where certain parts of the Western Cape and the Northern Cape are under the command of Somalians who buy property. You cannot have young women who are bought for 3,000 in Orkney, and mothers are forced to take that and the women are owned. We need to be able to understand people's cultures, and they need to also understand our culture. And therefore, we have recommended that at local government, you have structures that coordinate that relationship, looking at harmonizing relations there, but also looking at making sure that we can break down this foreign labor being played by unscrupulous job givers in South Africa versus the locals. So we want to break that down to the local levels, because we think that their communication will be better. People know each other. People will relate to each other better. And once we can deal with the local, at a national point, we will dispel this thing that South Africa is drifting towards a xenophobia. We're not xenophobic. We're simply saying we've got cultures, we've got laws. South Africans residing in any country must not take our names in vain and go illegal in those countries. They must respect the laws there. They must respect the cultures there. Otherwise, those countries must just tell them to forsake and come back to South Africa. And that is where we are standing, that our cultures, our laws must be respected. And we have a responsibility also towards those people who reside us. They must be protected. They must be given every necessary help. So we need to harmonize that.
Thank you, Comrade Pule. We're done on our input.
Okay. And I must thank Mamtandi and Marfogo for the enriched presentation on peace and stability. I'm sure these are issues that affect. What's the problem with the light?
Yes, Abandon.
So it's a load shedding of a special type.
Yeah, with special characteristics.
So yeah, we'll open the floor for questions.
Work back live, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Christian, Natasha, Gavin, my brother, your name? Puti Musumani. Okay. What's your company? What's the name of your media? Inside Politics. Or Inside Politics, not Inside Factor. Okay. Okay, we'll start with Christian, go to Natasha, Gavin, and Puti.
It's Christian from my question is, you talk about that Africa should be better integrated, but at the same time that the movement of people across borders should be better managed. Is this not a contradiction? And when you talk about the management of people across borders, what do you exactly mean by it? How should this be managed and why? And then just on the new, is this a new agency that you want to establish, this multi-agency against corruption? And what is the idea with this? Why is this necessary? How would this be different from the existing agencies in South Africa?
Just before the policy conference, when you were briefing members of the media, I remember you had said that conference wanted to discuss the issue of setting up an immigration board to deal with issues of migration, and at that time I remember you had proposed a complete overhaul of the immigration system. Did you discuss that perhaps? Yeah.
Norman, you got a question? Okay.
My question is, Norman Masubi from Speakers. My question is, regarding the control of the movement through the borders and stuff like that. The same thing is happening. There's a lot of concern about your corruption, people letting, how are people law enforcement letting people in the country because of their receiving certain things from those foreigners. How are you going to handle it better than what the security class is doing currently?
Thank you so much. Tom Riddles from News in Africa, Channel 405. Number of questions. Beginning with the Countering Russian Activities in Africa Act, and the fact that the Act goes on to say that the U.S. government would have to counter activities by Russia by the use of, including through foreign aid programs, and you've described that as bullying, that Act. What are you going to do about it as the ANC? Is there any official government response that the ANC has instructed the government to take? Has the conference resolved on the recent increasing arrests of high-profile international figures in South Africa that are wanted by Interpol? What comes to mind is the arrest of 4 people in Durban who were allegedly financiers for ISIS, and then the arrest of one of Israel's most wanted gangsters and then also the recent report of the alleged shipping of cocaine from Brazil to South Africa using the ports in the Western Cape through a phenomenon known as ghost ships, which appear to be pervading South Africa's security infrastructure. What is the conference decision on that phenomenon? Like Minister Tani, what you said, you mentioned something about Somalians there, and I'd just like to get clarity on whether the ANC believes that we are approaching a national security threat with these activities in South Africa. What kind of threat exists to community stability with the presence of these groups, or do you still believe that these scattered individuals who are not coordinated, and then the ANC being a Pan-Africanist organization, how is this predicament going to affect your relationship with other African countries? Has there been any head of state to head of state engagement or minister engagement regarding their activities? Thank you so much.
Okay, Putin.
Thank you, Putin, so Inside Politics. 3 questions. The first one, the conference looked at the allegations that there were or are political interference in terms of finalizing investigations of the TRC cases, Pacific Road case in point. The second one, if you could comment on this one, are you not afraid that the failure to close these cases will undermine efforts for a genuine and true reconciliation? The last one, did the conference entertain in any way the granting of parole for Islam leader Janus Walus? Did the conference entertain this in any way? Thank you.
Okay, Joe.
Okay, indeed, with the SABC, on different platforms, our cabinet ministers are at pains to explain or to what was the perception that South Africa is xenophobic or South Africa is xenophobic. But the only thing the state is complicit or our government is complicit because it's only in South Africa where you can have people just walking in and walking out of the country and do as they please. Don't you think you aid in this perception that South Africans are xenophobic because there is a state's inability to really deal with this lawlessness that is in the country that is sometimes committed by people who are not of South African and maybe second, can start more lawlessness in the Western Cape, this game buying. This thing has been going on for some time. I think it's now as old as the Middle East crisis. I think some of us, when we were born, there was the Middle East crisis. And even today in the Western Cape, when Gavin Whittley was born, that problem against that is still there. What is the state doing? Is it because some of us are not in the Western Cape, I don't stay in the Western Cape, maybe it doesn't really concern us? It's a problem that has been there for years, but it seems there is no really political will or maybe a will from our government to deal with cancer. At some point, kids as young as 3 years old had to hide under the tables while people were shooting outside. It's only in the Western Cape that is happening. It's not happening anywhere. Is there a will to really deal with it?
Okay. Namtan, you will start, then you will leave the others that you want me to come to. I'm delegating upwards. That's the advantage.
Contradiction in our approach to migration. I don't think there is any contradiction. We do have porous borders. We have been upfront about that. We have also been upfront about the states over the recent past in looking at the priorities in shifting resources to look more internally rather than to protect And therefore, you look at the police, you look at defense, and their budgets going down. You therefore see what is happening around the borders because they have not been properly resourced. But we say to you that we have been discussing this, that there is, even if it is still a little bit and coming into drifts, there is an improvement. Firstly, the police have begun to deal with their own issues, and therefore they must work with us as defense at the borders. I must say, at certain border posts, there is a lot of improvement. We get reports daily on the contraband, the cars that are confiscated there. But there is also a section of our borders where we need to actually begin to focus in the Mozambique, KZN area. Their matters are really serious, and we must give more attention and more resources to that. That is being addressed. In a way, the BMA, having now been put into action, is going to deal with those issues, but that does not take away the responsibility of the National Defence Force to be properly resourced to do that which it must do, and that is to ensure that our borders are more secure, that the integrity of this country is better protected. And that is why we are looking internal as defense to say, how do you reprioritize? You referred to ghost ships. Part of the reason is that around the Navy, most of our resources have not been updated. We have now begun to thankfully put our submarines back into water. We are now working into putting all our frigates ready to take whatever. We have also been putting in new patrol boats, which are inshore, and therefore we will begin to do what is necessary to even guard our oceans. What is important is for us to then deal with the legislative issues. Who has control of the skies? Who has control of the seas? Now, your policies and the laws give some of these powers to transport, which is a civilian activity. When any plane lands here, your first question as journalists in South Africa is, where is the Air Force? Why are you not dealing with this? So we're dealing with also taking back policies and programs which should be belonging here, giving authority where we think it should be. You cannot expect the Air Force to jump in when the skies, the authority is given to a civil body. And therefore, systematically, we are discussing these things. We are opening of the north. There's another question that says, why are you speaking now about the anti-corruption body? It is important for South Africa to come up with a dedicated anti-corruption body which is national, which can coordinate. For instance, after Nigeria set up their anti-corruption body, they came to us. And because there is coordination now, you begin to see Nigeria, and when we set up ours also, and it begins to get to sink your teeth into dealing with issues of cross-nation corruption. Following up, it makes things easier. You will also remember how difficult it has been to follow up onto the resources. In our commission, we also came to say, we are now having that done. We are following the money that has been stolen. We are bringing back in the people who have been running away with the resources. That begins to deal with issues of corruption, syndicated monies, but also to deal with syndicates here. Coordination with countries that we have relations with also enables us to identify, because most of what you are crying about, the syndicates, gangsters, some of those have a character of actually being imported, and some of that is disguised as your simple corrupt activities here, but they are used to funnel funds elsewhere. And yes, we have had a discussion, the former Minister of Defense and I had more than 2 meetings dealing with issues of illicit mining, dealing with the Zamazama issues, and we agreed on certain processes. We are hoping that we will resume those discussions again with the new Minister of Defense in Lesotho. With Botswana, we are in sync. We will not allow that to happen. So, yes, there is discussion in SADC. I am yet to meet up with my counterparts in Zimbabwe, because we think that as defense, this falls right into our responsibilities. They must worry about how their nationals are behaving, protect their sovereignty. We will also do that. If you touch the economy of any country, you begin to touch how they will self-sustain. You begin to actually invite civilians to take up issues in a manner that begins to undermine the growth of your economy. And that is when we step in. And that is why we have even deployed and will continue to deploy, shoot those who abuse us by going to steal wires and systems, sometimes just vandalize the substations. We will be there, because we know that if we do not interact with that, it will be the next point for South Africans to rise and say, but we can't continue to be made to sit in the darkness. So yes, what sometimes looks like an ordinary civil matter can quickly develop into undermining the state, and the state must always be agile enough to deal with those issues. You are saying we're contradicting ourselves with protecting those who are amongst us and allowing free movement. We're not. We're simply saying that we want to make sure that there is stability in our country, that the laws of our countries must be respected. We don't care whether you are a South African or not, you will respect our laws, and therefore action must be taken. But we are also saying we must not always allow non-discussions between South Africans and foreigners. And that is why we deliberately set out to say, at local government, engage. We had a situation in the Northwest where a 9-year-old was impregnated. The child disappeared. The foreigner who was running the spaza shop deep in the rural areas was killed by the community. Do you want that to continue? In their custom, they can marry. They can marry at 9 years. In South Africa, in Setswana Kimuila. So you also need to go out there and to be seen as educating the people who live amongst yourselves, but also to advise them, if you want to live amongst us here, this is what you follow. If you want to open a business here, this is how you license it, so that we begin to have things orderly and systematic. Because otherwise, spaza shops are springing up, there are no licensing, they are not banking, we lose. South Africans lose their business to these ones because they are not paying taxes, they are not registered anywhere. They can do the price war and win. And therefore you create also ructions there and unable to contain it. And it is then interpreted as xenophobia. And we're saying sometimes it is about survival of the inhabitants of your country asserting their own ownership here. Sometimes it is about the fear of hunger. And so somebody must intervene and say, let's deal with this thing. We are all brothers and sisters. We also must deal with people, the stateless people, where we half-heartedly, we allowed people to come in, Renamo, Frelimo, debacle. They were not recorded. We provided accommodation. We even turned the camps into residential areas. They are still undocumented, and it is not fair to any human being to exist without having an affinity to any state. So those are the things that are still hanging that we are saying systematically we must deal with. You say the gangsters. The police have started to go back to their specific teams. I don't know police language. The task forces, yes. And they are beginning to retrain. They have also been doing what is really exciting for me, not just recruiting youngsters into the defense, but going after hard skills, recruiting them, placing them, so that your forensics, all your scientific issues, they are now in-house. They have those people better trained, done. We must now deal with the issues also of how we empty our prisons. And that discussion is ongoing between countries, because some countries, our system says they must agree. And when the prisoner refuses to agree to go home because it is harsher at home, we continue to keep them here. And the problem is that you then do not have enough resources within corrections to properly supervise parolees and so on and so forth, and therefore you see the circle of crime just revolving. If you take over, I'll come back on others.
No, just to conclude on these issues, colleagues, is that that issue of the agency is not new. Remember, there's a constitutional court injunction on the matter. But at the very same time, we acknowledge that when we disbanded the agency at the time, we threw the baby with the water. We are correcting that, and it's an international practice, and we have seen the results, how it works, like Comrade Mamtande has explained. The question of those people that are high profile, that are being arrested here, it demonstrates the cooperation that exists between law enforcement agencies across the world. Because South Africa cannot be a safe haven for criminals, whether of whatever form, hardened criminals for transnational organized criminality, whether it is in the illicit economy, all forms of illicit economy, including issues of human trafficking, the issues of drugs. We know the drugs, how they've been flowing from Afghanistan. Afghanistan, you know, there has never been peace. And it's been the biggest, the manufacturing hub, and how they come through our seas. And the issues, how they see, if you look around the Somali where Mamtande was referring to. These are some of the biggest activities around issues of arms and ammunition, illegal arms that are coming in. We don't actually manufacture and license AK-47s here. And you could see that some of these things that are happening here, we know where they are coming from, and our capability to respond. Therefore, the conference has taken a decision that we must be able to strengthen our mutual legal assistance program between states, because there are certain states that they don't want to respect those conventions. In our own case, you could see, within our own laws, if these people are found, we're able to deal with that. And we must commend ourselves, even how you manage the issues of terrorism, money laundering, the relevant legislation, we have said it has been passed. The issue with the US, we enjoy cordial and fraternal relations over some time, but there are matters we don't agree. South Africa as a sovereign state, we stand for certain things guided by our own lodestar, which is the Freedom Charter, how we handle matters of international relations. We are not a smaller state. We are not a sub-state. We are a full state. Irrespective of the size of our population and GDP, we will stand our own ground with the other progressive forces of the world to say issues that seeks to promote unilateralism and protectionism, even coming closer to issues of bullying, we will say no to that. But issues that are actually agreed by the United Nations, which is a body that allows all of us to have agreed position, will support it. On this particular matter, the government will be directed to engage with the USA. But also the AU and SADC, they've started discussing these issues and particular implication. This is not the first one. You remember the Algoa one first. Yeah. That came in with certain implications that we faced. In the very same way, because these diplomatic relations, they do exist, we'll be able to engage with them. And the issues of one of the issues about certain foreign nationals, our view is that all people who are actually within the borders of South Africa must respect the law, irrespective of nationality. The law is the law. It is going to be applied fairly without any prejudice. We know that there are certain incidents about certain communities that don't bank. They don't bank. They run certain activities here. That's why in the resolution, one of the decisions that was taken by conference, local government and other agencies have been directed to do a full audit of all businesses that are happening so that we have a data bank. Who owns what and what kind of products are being sold to them. And then lastly, local government will have to apply the bylaws. And where the bylaws are having weaknesses, it's a matter to be looked at. On the issues of the TRC matters, you will see when the ANC finally circulates our final resolution, we spend more time on this. Because we knew that there were certain decisions that were made after we chose the path of the TRC. Some people should have been prosecuted. We took long. But you could see over the last 2 to 3 years, and it is a political will is there, that these matters must be brought on board. And the ANC is supporting that, led by the Minister of Justice, all the capacities being brought to them. The matter of the release of parolee Yalus is a very painful matter for the Congress movement and many peace-loving South Africans. We respect the decision of the court, but we are very pained that even at this stage, we feel that this parolee never gave a full disclosure. There was no consideration about how the family feels. That's why the ANC has decided to be part of a joint program led by the South African Communist Party to look at all these other options that we have in order to be able to deal with this particular situation, if there are still any legal recourse and options that are available. But in compliance with the law, painstakingly, the leadership of government has ensured that this parolee serve this parolee here in South Africa, so that the sentence can be concluded and the conditions that the Minister of Justice were able to do that. But it's one of those matters that it's a wound that we cannot be able to close. Those are some of the issues that I thought, Mamtandi, while we are responding on these issues, the immigration board, Tasha, and the courts fully agreed we are overhauling all the system. Our immigration laws are not going to be only about issues of immigration. We are going to look how do we link with our international relation policy framework, around how do we relate with other states, other blocs, and other bodies, but more importantly, we must be guided by our view of regional integration, but also our view that there must be peace and friendship. Movement of people, we're not going to stop it, but it must be regulated, it must be managed. One of the things that is going to happen, the ANC has a strong view that our neighbors, they need to take responsibility. And government has been given the responsibility to engage with them. They cannot allow the depopulation of their own countries and put in place burden and the strain on our own limited resources, ultimately causing some tensions within communities. We are one people, but we just have to be able to manage. Therefore, government to government, how do we handle the issues of resources that are being used? The issues of those people, Mamtand, you spoke about, that have been staying next to the borders over, some of them close to 40 to 50 years now, 2 to 3 generations. They don't know whether they belong to Eswatini, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, and so forth. And it's a matter that the state, we said, let them engage with the other states and look at a mechanism to resolve this matter, because it has remained unresolved. And if it remains unresolved, it becomes a fertile ground for conflict. It becomes a fertile ground to be able to spring issues of criminality. Therefore, those are the issues, Comrade Pule, that we thought to say, but our document is very detailed. and very consistent with the discussion document, the policy conference recommendation, and this one, they have been fully reaffirmed. Then government must be able to produce a program of action. What are the immediate issues that must be resolved, and then on the medium term and long term? Thank you.
Comrade Pule, can I be naughty? I thought I should address this thing. I've recently made some news because I said that we are being bullied as a country. I stand very clear that South Africa is a sovereign state and that I'm a Minister of Defense in the Republic of South Africa, and I saw allegiance to my country first. I am very clear that this bill that has been passed by the two houses of America that focuses on any interest of any African government that does business with Russia, that identifies business people and individuals for sanctions, has unanimously been rejected by SADC. Hopefully Africa will continue to be resolute and united in rejecting that, because that is what we refer to when we say bullying. I'm not accountable to any ambassador in this country. I'm accountable to the President, to Parliament, to the people of South Africa, and their interests come first. I will not be bullied by Foreign Affairs, even if it is my minister. We are colleagues. There's nice thing about being colleagues. It is that no minister can order the other around. So I stand very steadfast that we cannot be bullied simply because we are a growing economy. We have national interests. We have regional interests. We must make sure that we stand our ground where it counts. But then, of course, we will not be reckless and risk the relationship that we have with the US. We do not interfere in their relationship with Mexico. We have our issues, we make our comments, but we cannot instruct a minister in another country. And that is what I want to say on that. Because I think sometimes we as South Africans, we even allow things that should be uniting us to increase the disunity. The Chris Hani, for me, Walus is nothing else but a murderer. A ruthless murderer who has not acknowledged that targeting somebody well-respected, honest, not corrupt, and killing them simply because they were of a different ideology and of a different skin color. The fact that his release increases the racial disunity in our country is a point. I don't think South Africans must be proud that we divided ourselves with some people in white communities, even rejoicing, because that actually takes us back to the history we want to forget. We want generations to forget, because some of us really want to focus South Africa in a path where non-racialism, non-sexism is something that will endure in this country. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mamthandi, and much appreciated. I'm sure members of the media have been fully clarified on the resolutions, the key areas considered by the Peace and Stability Commission.
And now they feel safe.
Yes, now you can see that we are serious about making sure that we are safe. So I'm now going to invite Mama Hlaule to come and engage you on education, health, science and technology. So I saw that Mamulu is here. So on issues of the economy we are covered, because we did promise that we will have everyone here. So I said, Mataba must check with you just to make sure that we don't miss out. So we'll do communications and the battle of ideas afterwards, and then we'll do ETC. We'll be waiting for Mataba. Did you check IR?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow that plan.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay, Mama Tab. Mom, you know, she corrects me all the time on the surname. Okay, Mom Mhaule.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, no thanks.
Greetings to you, and greetings to everybody. I think this is the right order, that we start with education, higher education, health, science and technology, then communication, then ETC. That is the correct order. So on education, health, science and technology, we looked at all the previous resolutions that we took since the 52nd conference and find that most of them have been implemented, and those that were unable to implement, then we reiterated them and took them to the high level. And so we look at cross-cutting matters, issues that are affecting all of us. And we'll know that education is a foundation for everything. So on the cross-cutting issues, like I indicated, the previous resolutions, gender representation, science, technology, engineering, art, mathematics, and centralizing funding for the health infrastructure, support for all sectors participating in the district development model, looked at the general infrastructure, the deteriorating infrastructure, as to what best can be done. Then on science and technology, we agreed that we need to invest more on research and development and attract funding for research and development across all sectors. This should also assist to enhance service delivery through the use of and promotion of new innovation across all sectors. On basic education, the Commission reiterated on the three-stream model. That's why there was more emphasis on the realignment of basic education and higher education, especially on the TVET colleges, that they must speak to the issues of the three-stream model of education, because in the past, every child in South Africa must just pass grade 12, must push to the academic path, even if they are not good at that. So now we are emphasizing vocational skills, technical skills, as well as the academic route. So, but that must speak to the TVET colleges. The TVET colleges must be able to link with what basic education is providing. Remember, basic education must lay a foundation for the economy, because we are responding to the needs of the economy in the country. If we are not preparing them at a young age, then they are not going to make it at higher education, and they are not going to respond to the economy of our country. So these are the issues that were more emphasized. On health, we looked at the issues of national health insurance, which is a decision that was taken in Polokwane in 2007. And we started implementing it, but for it to run effectively, we need to improve on the infrastructure and work together with private sector, because if we don't get a buy-in from private sector, it will not work. And we don't want to allow a situation that the gap widens between those who have and those who do not have. That's why now the bill, we still call it a bill because it's in Parliament, but it's towards its concluding stages. and immediately it gets concluded, then it gets running. So these were the high-level issues that we looked at. On the NSFAS, because a decision was also taken in Bulugwane about the free higher education. It's not something new. It was just a matter of process, and it's implemented now for the deserving students. But we know it was further emphasized that there's this missing link, missing middle. The people, children of police officers, clerks, whose parents are earning more than what is stipulated in terms of the qualification of NSFAS. And they cannot also afford higher education. So we said we need to strengthen the efficiencies in the NSFAS that will have more resources to accommodate the missing middle of those people, including children of journalists and some people that, we'll take it, you are working, but you may not afford. So this is what we are working on now, that let's improve on the efficiencies of NSFAS. We have identified the weaknesses of the NSFAS, but now we are working on that. Remember, the whole issue is a skills revolution, and for the changing world. That's why we say the link must be strengthened between basic education and higher education. When we speak robotics, we speak ICT in basic education, higher education must be in a position to produce such a teacher who will respond to the needs of these new dynamics. So we're not static, we're moving forward. Comrade Kumbuzo will highlight more on this one. We are not static. So higher education must be able to produce such teachers who will respond to this dynamic world. So these are the resolutions that were taken. I don't want to dwell much more. They are about 68 resolutions. So I'm just summarizing them, then I can respond on questions. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks. Can we get hands? Regina has managed to summarize all of the resolutions that were taken by the relevant commission. Gavin?
Thank you so much. It's going from Union Africa. You said you need more resources for NSFAS to fund the missing middle. Did the conference specify at all what kind of, is it an enlargement of budgetary allocation to NSFAS, and if so, do they have any specifics on what they term to be the missing middle? Did you discuss what the missing middle would look like? And then, I'm sorry, I didn't get the resolutions on health, Dr. Ron. I must have missed it myself. I wanted to check whether or not the conference had given a summary or an assessment of South Africa's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, how they believe the government did, and specifically whether the conference had given a comment on the lockdown and how they believe the government performed in its administration of that lockdown.
Okay. Do we have any more? So you are covered on issues of NSFAS, of health, technology. Okay. I guess they are pretty straightforward.
Yeah, they're straightforward. That's why I said we need to improve on the efficiencies, because there are leakages on NSFAS. If we close those leakages, then we'll find more resources. Remember, the country does not have unlimited resources. The country's resources are very limited, and the needs are more than the resources that we have as a country. So we need to work on what we have. So if we improve on the efficiencies, we will. The missing middle are indicated as some teachers, not all, some teachers, police officers, are your junior staff level, at government level, even at private sector level, your police officers, traffic officers, all those, when you look at their salary, it's above the stipulated amount for those that need to be helped. But it's not enough to can fund education in South Africa because education is very expensive. So these are the kind of missing middle. They belong everywhere. They cut across private and public sector. So the resolution says, let's improve on the efficiencies. And we noted that there are too much leakages. We all know, you know some of the leakages of the NSFAS, and some will just come and register and not go to school and find that the person was paid for the whole year. And when we check, the person just came to register and receive NSFAS, and the system could not be able to detect that the person is not longer continuing with his studies. So now, these are the things that we want to look at. On the pandemics in general, we looked not necessarily COVID-19. COVID-19 served as a lesson to all of us. So we said the system of government must be able to respond to any pandemic. And we want to thank COVID-19 because what it did, it opened our eyes that we are able now to respond to any situation. So a resolution was taken that we need to be responsive to any kind of pandemic or disaster that might happen in the country. It can be a natural disaster, it can be diseases, it can be whatever, like COVID has shown us, but there is a clear recommendation on that, and it cuts across. It's not only for health, education, science, and technology, but it cuts across government in general and the country in general. Thank you very much.
Natasha?
I remember in July there was this conversation about working schools, especially in rural areas where there's a low attendance. Was this brought up in conference again? Discussions around working schools?
That decision was taken a long time ago. So the merging of schools it's a process. Schools are being merged. What is important is community participation, explaining to communities that this school is not viable, because if a school is small, then the norm of teacher provision is that maybe 1:35. So that school, it starts from grade 1 to grade 7 and with one teacher. So it cannot be viable because that teacher cannot be an expert to all the subjects. So we communicate with parents in that area and make them understand. That's why we build even boarding schools, that those teachers and the learners, they come to the boarding schools, that they can get equal education like all other learners in the country. And one other thing that we emphasized is the infrastructure. But a decision also was taken. That's why most of the decisions were taken in the past conferences, like to put more emphasis on maintenance of infrastructure, because we looked at rolling out infrastructure without focusing on maintenance. But now the resolution here said, let's focus more on maintenance of infrastructure, be health infrastructure, be school infrastructure, whether social development, government facilities, we need to maintain them, that they should not dilapidate like we are doing. You find that you built a school in 10 years' time, that school is dilapidated because there's no budget. But we want to thank government because even now on the MIG, the percentage of maintenance is more than the percentage of rolling out. And we also, efficiencies must be put and look at the population dynamics, that you don't build a school where people are moving to where people are highly concentrated or where there are economic activities, and you continue building a school there and find that in 2 years' time that school is a white elephant. So we move with times and the population dynamics to bring facilities to where majority of the people are, and that helps us.
Okay. No man. So inyaka le dingwale fase. Le na o ka re le ya dula la dinagana and then la di tsweletse. Okay. Christian. Okay, Ntego.
The issue of with regard to education, there is a general concern that in terms of there's a whole lot of people who are teachers who are growing old or now at their age of when they are approaching retirement, and there isn't much that is being done to replace them or to have people to replace them. Did you discuss as a committee, did you discuss the solution of how to, the transition that needs to be done and how fast can that be done?
Transitional?
In terms of the transition.
Okay, that's fine. Debo?
Okay. Did you, as the Commission, discuss the exodus of learners from their respective localities? For instance, if you stay in Soweto, did you discuss the fact that we've seen young kids being bussed out of Soweto every day to former modesty or former government, apartheid government schools, leaving government schools in Soweto and going to school at a government school in Fender Township, for instance. Did you discuss that? And I'm asking this because most schools in the township have been mentioned, and at some point we're told that their role is very low. That's why people are moving out. And if you look at some of the reasons that are not being told, it's because the infrastructure has been allowed to decay in the townships, in rural areas. The infrastructure, even teachers are not attending. Some of them, they come at 11 o'clock, at 1 o'clock they go. So have you discussed that? As opposed to glorifying former apartheid schools, those schools that we used to attend in the townships, in the rural areas, are becoming centers of excellence as opposed to be like white elephants.
Yeah, on the issue of unemployed graduates, we look them because they cut across. It's not only teachers, social workers, even engineers, and some doctors have qualified but are not yet absorbed by the system. When we look at the skills that are needed by the country, we don't work alone as government. We work with private sector. Because those skills, we sat together, when we develop the skills that are needed by the country, we sat together with private sector, what skills do you need? And they indicated, that's why when we fund the skills, we fund as per the agreement. But it's just unfortunate that most of the time we expect government to be the one that absorbs. And yet government is not an employment agent. We work together with the private sector. On the side of teachers, as we speak, we have majority of teachers that are not yet absorbed by the system because of the numbers of the teachers that we produce. On the other hand, when you look sitting down, you think the teachers in the system are aging. But when you come closer to a school, you find that there are more young teachers that are there in the schools. Even when we have the National Teaching Awards, most teachers that get the awards now are the 35 years, less than 40 years, are young teachers. And as we're sitting now, we're sitting with that challenge that we need to absorb them. We encourage elderly teachers who are at my age to retire early, to open space for the young teachers. But it's not an easy thing because some of the skills from those teachers, we still need that they can be cascaded down to those new teachers, that they they share the experience. We have more teachers that are unemployed as things stand. They are there, we are working on the system, and the number of learners are increasing, of course, year after year. You can check from the learners that wrote matric in 2022, they are more than all the previous years. It tells that the number of learners is increasing, but the number of teachers, every university is producing teachers every year. Even this year, 2023, we'll have new teachers, yet we still have teachers who qualified in 2022 who are not yet absorbed. And when there's a complaint by parents that they think that we prioritize those who receive the Funza Lushaka bursary. Yet it's not the case. We prioritize the priorities of the school. If the school is an MSTA school, we want a maths teacher, we want a technology teacher, whether you are a Funza Lushaka or your education was paid for by your parents, we absorb the one that respond to the needs of the school, which respond to the needs of our economy moving forward. So we have more teachers. We have more teachers. It's a stress that we are living with now, that we have more teachers that are idling, and that content and the methodology will disappear as they are sitting at home. But we are working on that with SABC and the teacher unions to make sure that they get absorbed in the system. So on the exodus of learners, we are facing challenges in two provinces, your Western Cape and Gauteng. But it's because of the economic dynamics. Parents are moving to Gauteng, and come January, now it's January, the exodus of learners who will want space, who have not applied because they were not aware that their parents will be coming to Gauteng or Western Cape. It's a challenge. Yes, I agree that some learners would have a school of choice, and parents, that one is acceptable. We accept parents to have a school of choice, but not because the rural and township schools are not producing. On the 19th of January, Minister Motshekga will be announcing results. If we look at the learners who shall have obtained high marks, they come from rural areas, they come from poor provinces, they come from rural schools, they come from township schools, majority of them. So to me, I always argue the fact that we don't have a teacher that is trained to teach at a rural school. All teachers are trained at VETS, are trained at UJ, are trained at TEFLOP, wherever university, and they have the same content and methodology. So they teach the same. It's a mentality issue that parents would say, I want my child to go to town because it's a town school, but those that are living in rural areas, they are the ones that get 300 over 300 in mathematics, in physical science, in accounting, and all these other subjects. That one is you'll be there when the results are announced. You'll see that what I'm saying that is true. That it's just a mentality that I want my child to go to town, I want my child. And they cause problems for these children because they have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning when other children will wake up at 6 o'clock and then go to school at 7 o'clock. So this is a challenge. We need to work on the mentality. So this is what is still troubling us as Basotho.
Yes. Okay.
One last question, sorry. The conference.
So when you say Starisa Musotho, they don't understand. Okay.
I'd just like to find out if the conference talked about teenage pregnancies in schools.
Yes.
What was the discussion and any intervention that was announced?
Yes, it's not a new resolution. It's a resolution that was taken in the last conference that the sector needs to deal with issues of teenage pregnancy. It's a fact, it's not a matter to be dealt with by education alone. It's a societal matter. We need to work together to fight teenage pregnancy. That's why Minister Motshekga will always argue that these children are not impregnated at school. They are impregnated at home by uncles, cousins, and stepbrothers and stepfathers. So we have a policy. What the sector developed is a policy to deal with how to handle.
But we are live on television, so anything you say is being seen by viewers at home. Okay, let's proceed.
Yeah, the policy is how to manage when the learner is pregnant. But to address that, we have road shows to go out, talk to young people, and we use young people to talk to their peers because they normally listen to their own other than listening to us as older people to say, we're not there during your teenage years. But we use them to talk to themselves. So we are winning, and again, the comprehensive sexuality education, we find it helping a lot because as we have improved on this, teaching the children about sexuality matters, not sex education. We always say this because it was misinterpreted by some notorious people to say we're teaching sex education. We're teaching comprehensive sexuality education, that they must understand their bodies, they must respect their bodies and respect other people's bodies. And if they understand, if they have information and knowledge, then issues of sexual intercourse, they become reduced. They know where they want to go. That's why we strengthen the career guidance, we strengthen life skills and life orientation as a subject, because some people take life orientation as a by the way subject, and that's where the future of our country and the future of the child is, in the life orientation as a subject, because it carries more than what we think it is. It tells them about themselves, their future and everything. So we in the sector, we take life orientation very serious, and it helps. Especially comprehensive sexuality education helps, because where we piloted where the rate of teenage pregnancy was high. And since we piloted, the rate went a bit down. So we are going to roll it to all districts in the country, and we believe that the rate will go down.
No, thanks. So just for their own sake, what she was clarifying is that there tends to be this belief from our own people in townships and villages that they should rather send their kids to schools in town, and they end up bearing the costs, and yet the pass rate of the ones that are in town and the ones that are in the townships is the same.
It's not a belief. But it's not a belief.
Yes.
Some schools in the townships are dilapidated.
Some schools are dilapidated. That's why.
Even in town. So yeah, we also have that challenge in town. No, that's fine. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll now invite
Thank you.
Communications and the Battle of Ideas. Thanks, Maresh. Comrade Thomas. So they are taking your briefings live, all of them. So, the live view, people, so that they know it doesn't come from me. The live view, the SABC was saying, hey, is it newsroom? Yeah. Yes. Oh, okay. They were raising that. So everything else that we are doing here, our people are getting it live as is. No, but you are here. You're only. Maralimo, Lite, Lord. And we're here supporting you. No. So, Makadzi. Okay, let me introduce Makadzi, Comrade Kumbozo. Chavin, newly elected member of the National Executive Committee. She will be taking you on resolutions of the communications and battle of ideas. ETC is here, IR is here, so we'll find ways with Matoba on how we get them the resolutions of social transformation. I think it's a very important area that we can't just leave out. So society will ask, what did we say on GBV and all other issues? So we'll make sure, actually we must arrange for them to get those resolutions today still, even if no one presents them, but they must have a copy. So we're making that commitment to the media and society out there, that we did have a discussions on social transformation, and we have those resolutions, and they will be shared. Over to you, Comrade.
Thank you, Comrade Pule, and thank you to the South Africans who are watching. We were dealing with the Commission on Communications and the Battle of Ideas, and they call it Digital Communications and the Battle of Ideas. In that commission, we focused on the battle of ideas, on broadcasting and media transformation, information communication, postal services and the post bank, digitizing government, including economic transformation across the ICT industry. And of course, like all commissions, we reaffirmed the resolutions of the 54th National Conference and also the resolutions of previous conferences that have not yet been implemented. And there was a review of some of those. As Comrade Regina Mhaule indicated, maybe let me start to deal with the issues that were raised in the questions that were raised in that commission, as it related to that commission that affects our commission before we go to the resolutions of the commission. On the issue around ICT versus COVID-19 pandemic, as the question was raised, we acknowledge that COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the digitalization of the country as it has done across the globe. And it had an impact on skills development in the country, but also impacted on how education, health, but also commerce is done in the country, but all other sectors. And as such, we are working with on digital skills training, we are working with the Department of both basic education and higher education on how we make sure that our learners and graduates graduate with the relevant skills. Specific to basic education, there are 1,000 schools now that are teaching robotics, coding, and data analytics, and we are working to connect all schools. We've connected just over 5,000 schools so far, but we're working to connect the remainder, just over 20,000 schools, to make sure that they have access to technology to enable ICT learning, but also to enable learning using technologies. And second to that, we are working on making sure that every learner in a public school, including those in rural areas, and their parents have access to emails and they have email addresses, and we should announce the numbers soon. We're just finalizing the details with the Department of Basic Education on that. And we're also working to make sure that the townships and rural schools, they then can benefit from the use of technologies to become centers of excellence. For instance, schools that do not have science laboratories because the infrastructure to build is expensive. We are working and will announce with the Department of Basic Education the rollout of virtual laboratories so that the children who are doing STEM courses, who have to do physical science and chemistry and biology experiments, who did not have the opportunity but they were reading experiments from their textbooks, can then use technology to do the experiments through the virtual laboratories, because it's going to be cheaper and more efficient, and that's what technology does. And in terms of higher education and training, is the training that we are doing, the curricular content of that relates to skills and the skills development, the digital skills development strategy and plan that has been developed and adopted in the country, and that rollout of it, including the launch of the AI Institute that we did on the 30th of November, which that launch is also accelerating how bringing together the institutions of higher learning, both universities of technologies, universities and colleges, to make sure that they train the relevant skills, and that partnership is working very well. And then maybe going back specific to this commission on the battle of ideas in terms of resolutions, And we're saying the ANC must recommit itself to its historical mission of transforming society into a democratic, non-racial, non-sexist society, which is the values that are enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic as well. But we've seen a recent resurgence in racial incidences in the country, but secondly, the attempts to reverse the gains of democracy in terms of transforming the economy. We have been taken to court around BEE and transformation issues on the economy. And we're saying the ANC cannot afford to sit behind and not fight back or push back and lead the national discourse on transformation, because the 30 years that we have had are not enough to reverse the impact of more than 300 years of segregation and exclusion of the black majority in this country, and the black majority cannot remain with political power and not with economic power, and therefore the ANC must lead the national discourse on transformation and remind us that the journey to transform this country is still going to be longer, because the resources and infrastructure is not ready, and the 30 years was never enough to deal with the backlog to address the exclusion of blacks in particular who are in the majority. And we are saying the ANC has to make sure that they lead that national discourse. The ANC has an immediate responsibility to augment the research and policy capacity of the ANC, to guide both the general membership and the leadership to provide necessary leadership in this public discourse, because it must be, the public discourse must be led by facts. It cannot be some thumbsuck of the mood is the mood. It must be the mood that is informed by facts and the temperature that is out. So we need to have the ability, based on research capacity, to gauge public sentiment and provide adequate responses. And also we're saying we have to recalibrate our DIP, and that DIP that is recalibrated must be the custodian of all ANC official communication and communication of official position. And that communication must be coherent, centralized, and validated against established policies, principles, ethos, and conventions. But we also accept that the ANC itself had been the major contributor to the conflicted and confused messaging to the public, in particular the leadership, even at the ANC level. And we're saying the mandate from the 55th National Conference is that this leadership, this tenure of leadership, we should not see the ANC communicating past each other. The NEC must lead by example and communicate same message, same decisions, because decisions of the ANC are taken in ANC meetings, either as the officials or NWC or NEC, and those are the decisions that must be communicated. People are not allowed, in terms of democratic centralism of the ANC, to hold different views when there's a decision and that has already been taken on a matter. We can have different views when we are still convincing each other in terms of different positions, but when a decision is taken, there's one decision, there's one position that in the ANC. Whether you agreed with it or not agreed with it, that is the decision of the ANC, and you must uphold it and defend it, even when you do not like it. We have also noted that there's been a negative sentiment against the ANC in general in the public and the media. You have been the largest contributor in that sometimes your stories are not based by facts, but also it's also a limitation of both the ANC communicating its own achievements as an ANC, both as an ANC-led government, but the ANC itself saying this is what the government has done, acknowledging the limitations, but also communicating what the achievements have done. And we're saying we must improve that based on, and that communication of communicating our achievements based on our manifestos, but also on our policy decisions and the implementation. And therefore the ANC must continuously give progress report as led by the DIP. Also, in that part, we have always blamed GCIS of failure to communicate government successes. But GCIS function is to coordinate communication of government. Individual government departments and provinces and municipalities must communicate their own functions. We're saying the GCIS must take a central role in coordinating the government machinery to communicate achievements of the ANC-led government. But individual departments must then lead the communications of their own positions. On broadcasting, we are acknowledging that broadcasting services remains the most powerful method of imparting and receiving information, and for any democracy to achieve its objectives of freedom and access to uncensored information, broadcasting policies need to be progressive and considering the evolution of technology, innovation, and the need to broaden access. And in this side, we also acknowledge the progress we've made towards the conclusion of digital migration from analog broadcasting of television to digital broadcasting of television. I'm sure you are aware that from a government perspective, we have gone out to consult on the last date for analog switch off in the country. We are waiting for feedback, and when that is done, the government will then conclude that part. But we are saying, given the central role of broadcasting, we need government to urgently embark on public consultation to review and define the public broadcaster mandate, framework, and funding model. And in the interim, we're saying government must take such legislative or policy measures to stabilize the public broadcaster. Why it's necessary to discuss the mandate and the role of the public broadcaster? Because the public broadcaster has not remained in the course of being a public broadcaster. They've taken a stance of being either projecting certain ideologies, certain agendas, instead of being a public broadcaster whose objective and promote what is the national interest. And we're saying, let's have that conversation. And this is the right time when you are not faced with any elections, and have a discussion of what is that mandate of the public broadcaster and what is in the national interest. Not in the interest of the ANC party, not in the interest of opposition parties, but what is it that is in the national interest. You'd find that, I'll give you an example, the public broadcaster will run a broadcasting which in any other country that broadcasting will not have been run by a public broadcaster, because it has an impact on national sovereignty, national security, and also has an impact on the standing of the country. And they do not know how to mitigate, and we need to have that conversation so that we could put a framework and policies in place how they operate. But we need to have that that discussions must take place in an environment which is neutral, which is not conflicted by elections or election mood. And we are saying, we also admit that the public broadcaster, the current arrangement and structuring of the public broadcaster is not viable. And then we're saying we need to have a mechanism of saying, how are we going to fund what we call the public and developmental mandate of the SABC? And that the commercial wing of the SABC, because it has the SABC, a commercial wing, it must cross-subsidize that which is the developmental mandate of the SABC. And I'll explain briefly about that. And we are saying, we are proposing as the ANC that the household broadcasting levy must be considered to subsidize the ANC and replace the TV licensing fees, which are proving non-viable because it has become a very expensive exercise for the SABC to collect TV license fees, and also their ability to raise money from the market because of the debt of TV license fees. Financially, the SABC is burdened by the TV license fees, the debt and their contingencies that they have to provide for that. And in terms of what we call a developmental mandate, the SABC does not cover developmental sports. There are kids who are in rural areas. I can use examples. We are in the Eastern Cape, they are big in rugby and I think cricket and boxing. But the coverage, and in Limpopo they're also big in boxing, but the coverage is very low of those sports. And therefore you cannot even unearth talent from those rural areas. But you go to the other provinces where they've got, young people are very good in football. And there's no coverage of, the SABC sport is not covering that developmental football to make sure that we can unearth it. And that is a developmental mandate. In terms of also SABC education, how do we use the TV and radio to make sure that it imparts education content and curricula to make sure that young people who are not able to go to school on a particular day, they can access education through their TV channel, because we have universal access to television in South Africa and universal access to radio, and that's the developmental mandate. But when government is considering how to fund that, we must also look at what is the SABC as a public broadcaster fulfilling vis-a-vis that mandate. And we are saying the SABC bill, which is currently a bill because it's in Parliament, must enable the exemption of the SABC from the PFMA, because we acknowledge there's huge competition around broadcasting, not only from the local competitors, but also international competitors, but also the new media that is coming in. And if the SABC is tied back with the PFMA and the bureaucracies of implementing the PFMA, the SABCs will never be competitive in this country and will have to be bailed out once in a while. And therefore, we need to give them space and room to operate and compete in that competitive environment, because they're the only ones that are governed by the PFMA, whereas their competitors are not regulated by their PFMA. And we put conditions that we must, when we talk about the public mandate of the SABC, it must include setting up the education channel, health channel, children channel, and history channel to fulfill its public mandate. And we are also saying government, by 2023, government must table legislation to protect the sustainability of community media, including progression of community media from being community media to commercial media without the onerous requirements. There are radio stations, community media, that are very viable to become commercial media, but the rules are too cumbersome for them to progress to commercial media, and therefore that is hindering media diversity and causing proliferation of community media by allowing more new entrants without giving the space to move. And lastly, on the issue around broadcasting, we want government by 2023 to finalize the audiovisual strategy to deal with the promotion of local content, local language, cultural diversity and heritage, and to protect local media against unfair competition by international emerging medias like streaming and social media, who are not paying in South Africa and they are not regulated, whereas in Europe and in their home countries, they are paying and they are regulated, they pay taxes and they contribute, but they are stifling our own progress. On information and communication technologies, what is commonly known as ICT, we are saying government must review the ICT policy environment, laws and regulations to address transformation, which is and also technological developments and global developments and the evolving regulatory environment. This in particular, the ECA, the Electronic Communications Act, has been in place for more than 15 to 20 years to date without it being updated, and it's overtaken by events. A new environment is regulated by an obsolete law, and therefore that's why we're susceptible to court challenges, because the law that governs the sector is not in line with the developments of current developments and tendencies of today. And we are also acknowledging that South Africa has a great potential in being the host country for data centers and cloud technology, and that we must create an environment to allow data center is to be hosted in South Africa, or to be developed in South Africa, not only for South Africa but also for the continent of Africa, but also for the international market, given our climate, our language, and our positioning, and our time zones. And that we also acknowledge that the assignment of spectrum, which we had concluded the round last year, but there's new rounds that must come through with the spectrum policy that is being finalized, that the assignment of spectrum must be informed by the need to transform the ownership and control of the sector to include wider participation, especially for blacks, women, youth, and people with disability, and that the use of spectrum must extend beyond exclusive holding by electronic communications licensees. To this extent, consideration should include the use of spectrum by education and health sectors, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, and the new industries. And that the policy must be able to address that, to make sure that we have a regime that covers others, to ensure that when the economy goes digital, all the other sectors can be able to participate and move with speed, because spectrum has become the new gold. And we are saying the new round of spectrum licensing must address the key empowerment imperatives to ensure that economic transformation and participation of new entrants is achieved, and that there must be a consideration of measures to accelerate the rollout of world-class mobile infrastructure and fiber in rural areas and townships, to include access to fiber for schools and education in rural areas and townships, because that's what's going to drive education. But we must also create trade incentives, tax rebates, and agreed compact between government and the sector to encourage the rollout of fiber to the rural areas and townships, so that we meet each other halfway in terms of that investment. And also government must develop a roadmap for the decommissioning of 2G and 3G mobile network infrastructure and services, and the rollout of 4G and 5G mobile network, including to rural areas, in preparation for the advent of 6G technologies and services. and that also the SDIC, the State Digital Infrastructure Company that we are finalizing, must facilitate an integrated approach to serving and developing the sector through SMME participation in the telecommunications sector on most favorable terms, and assist municipalities to utilize the fiber infrastructure as a new revenue stream. And also government must create an enabling environment for the data centers and cloud technology to improve the competitiveness of South Africa, to exploit opportunities offered by the digital economy, and that the State Digital Infrastructure Company must build, enhance, secure and operate government data centers and the South African government cloud capacity. And that South Africa must take measures to realize its potential in satellite technology to increase access to communication, enhance technological and national sovereignty, and create R&D and satellite, because we already have satellite management capacity in this country. Because this is essential to also improve the country's R&D index globally, and for positive impact on our GDP. And that there must be pragmatic measures and policy and regulatory interventions to promote the intersection between ICT and other sectors and any other innovative solutions arising from the convergence of technologies. And why is this important is because ICT has no longer been ICT on its own. ICT has become not only an industry, but an enabler for all the other industries. If we want to be efficient in terms of new business models, efficiency of production, and also business processes, it's driven by ICT. Whether you are mining, you are using robotics to be more efficient, to save lives, and to reach where you cannot reach. And therefore, we must then take measures to make sure that that is positioned for all sectors. And that's why the partnership with education is important, to make sure that all South Africans are not excluded. We leave nobody behind. And that we must develop a national digital economy blueprint by end of 2023, and that South Africa should accelerate the digitization of government and society and ensure that at least 50% of South Africa is digitized by 2030. And that government, as raised during the peace and security resolutions, the issue around cyber security, we said government must ensure it has world-class capacity, capabilities and systems to enable access and to cap cyber security attacks on government information databases and prosecute cyber-related crimes, but also work with the private sector to protect South Africa from cyber attacks and make sure South Africa is cyber secured. And that the ANC and government must support the transformation of SAPO, the South African Post Office, to be competitive and viable in the digital economy, including funding of the mandate of Post Office, and that the Post Office is going to be the logistic pillar of government, and that will also enable SMMEs to participate in the e-commerce space and rural businesses, small businesses to participate in this, like what the UPS has done in America. And people think the UPS is not it's a postal services, so, and that we want our SAPO to move into the state of what the UPS is in the country, and that we must finalize the corporatization of the Post Bank and transform it into a state bank by the end of 2023, and we are on course for that. And also, we must investigate the framework for governance and operation of online platforms in South Africa. And this is related to the issue around the battle of ideas that the ANC-led government, through the DPME, the Department of Performance Monitoring and Evaluation, must develop a template for government to regularly report on the implementation of applicable ANC resolutions, and the party must hold government accountable for implementation of its resolutions. On the digital economy, the resolutions are that government must develop a framework. I think we have dealt with this one, and this framework must have clear and coherent targets for harnessing the immense potential of the digital economy, generate economic opportunities at scale, and make these opportunities more open to broader South Africans, so that we don't exclude a particular sector or section of South Africa because it's only those who have access to resources, who are wealthy, who can access technology, and therefore they can then participate in the digital economy as producers and contributors, and leave another segment to become consumers. We're saying that should not continue, and government should develop a policy and enabling policy and regulatory environment for digital cloud and data services that ensures appropriate management of data and operations of cloud technologies to make South Africa competitive and secure in the management and the flow of data. And government needs to develop a digital government strategy that spurs innovation in the country so as to improve quality of services and promote generation and consumption of local content. In this one is the commitment that government must be the first consumer of digital products and services that are done by South Africans, so that South African products do not become subservient to products from the West or the East. The products that are made in South Africa, we should not put rules to say you must follow PFMA, whereas when we adopted Zoom and all these other things, there was no PFMA that was applicable, but we hamstrung the innovation of our youth and South Africans in general to make sure, to get their products adopted by government. So we're saying government must be the first consumer of products and content, or digital products and services that are produced in South Africa. And we are also saying, given that South Africa and Africa has a reserve of what we call rare minerals that are responsible for the manufacturing of components for smart devices, we are saying that the government, South Africa must build manufacturing capacity in the semiconductor industry, taking advantage of the natural minerals resources as well as our skills capacity, entrepreneurial capability to produce digital products. And government must then create a conducive environment to promote the building of local chip manufacturing plants and infrastructure necessary to support the semiconductor industry. And we then also focus on what we call sector transformation issues, specifically because in that our view as the ANC is that the responsibility to transform the sector to be inclusive and address historical imbalances of the past is not an exclusive domain of government, but must jointly be carried with the private sector. And the resolutions are therefore that government must be deliberate in the transformation of the ICT and broadcasting industries by ensuring that all operators have a 40% minimum ownership threshold without equity equivalent, targeting designated groups within the next 3 to 5 years. And that on procurement, government must ensure that a minimum of 40% spent by and within the ICT sector benefits blacks, women, youth, and people with disability. Thank you.
No, thanks. I'm sure that members of the media will take serious interest in this because it has got a bearing on yourselves, newsroom, and others. So I'm sure that there will be some questions. Clarify, DIP means Department of Information and Publicity. Yes. Just to assist DIP, this one here. It's Department of Information and Publicity, because Comrade Kombuzo spoke about how we improve the work of DIP to manage internal communications, even by members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, and that is being done already through protocols. We can invite questions. I must say that on issues of communications, I also take specific interest because it's my subcommittee as well.
Senator Paul from Eyewitness News. You spoke about the role of the public broadcaster. You made an example saying that the public broadcaster ran a broadcast that any other public broadcaster across the world would not run. I don't know if you can go, if you can clarify what kind of broadcast that was, just to sort of get an idea. We do know, the previous CEO, had a thing that, looting or, violent protests should not be run on the public broadcaster. So I just want to get an idea so that, we are able to report correctly what kind of stuff that's triggered the public broadcast.
Okay, Kuti, Gavin.
First question is ANC member. On the brand ANC, my question on this one is that the delegate in any way discussed the fact that the Russian television RT is still banned. You celebrate next year. Are you planning any specific programs to highlight your achievements? On the other one, the colleague asked a question, but let me ask from another perspective. On the SABC, you spoke about how the role of the public broadcaster is. Am I understanding correct to be meaning that the ANC wants a state broadcaster instead? On the ownership, if you could clarify that, did the ANC discuss in a broader sense a media ownership and control in South Africa? Broadly, you spoke about 20%, and are you happy with that? With the media ownership and control in South Africa generally? And the last one, the big complaint about phasing out the Z80 reform. You broadly, you've shown us in this conference that you can use technology very well. Are there plans to phase out the Z80 reforms? Thank you.
Okay, Gavin.
Thank you so much. Governor Middles from Newsroom Africa, Channel 405. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Did I hear you correctly, Minister or NEC member? Did you say that the SABC has taken a stance on projecting certain ideologies instead of promoting the national interest? And you're saying let's discuss what the mandate of the SABC should be and what is in the national interest. Did you say that they're promoting certain ideologies? Which ones did the conference specify that they're promoting? In the ANC's view, what is the national interest that the SABC should be pursuing? Did I hear you correctly that you said that a household levy should be introduced? Is that to replace a TV license? Or is that to subsidize the developmental mandate that you were speaking about? I know that you said the SABC should set up an education channel and a history channel, and at the same time saying that the current arrangement and the structure of the SABC is not viable. How would you, has the conference deliberated on how they believe such a venture should be undertaken financially? And then on the more recent point, I'm sure you've noted the public pressure for the appointment of the SABC board. Did the conference deliberate at all on whether the appointment of the SABC board and the fact that it's yet to be done presents an opportunity for that to be done in a way which would reflect the national interest more, or what appears to be a changing view of the SABC in the governing party? I think I can summarize all these questions with one question. Has the ANC changed its view about what the SABC should be doing, or has it got a more definitive view now of the kind of SABC that it believes should exist?
Okay, Natasha.
Just a follow-up to what I'm asking. I know the prerogative of the president to appoint the board manually, but where does the board going to be appointed?
The board of the SABC. Okay, so
I have one more if I could. I have forgotten if it's allowed. I'm sorry. You had mentioned you want the post office to be like the UPS in the USA. Most recently, there's been a case study undertaken about trying to deliver one parcel from Eastern Cape to Gauteng, and eventually the parcel ended up back returned to center. What is the ANC's response to the assertion that the post office is near complete collapse? Or how do they characterize the current operations of the post office? Do they still think it's functional?
Okay, board, how soon? That's your question on the board. Okay, David.
Okay, no, I choose not to talk about the SABC because it has been, all the issues have been addressed by some of our colleagues. But I'm interested in understanding how are you going to balance, as you said, that you want community radio station to transcend from being just community radio station into commercial
community media, including community TV, media.
Yes, community media.
Yeah.
Over the past few years, community media is the only platform that can claim to have championed the cause of their communities because they were not influenced by any donors, they were not influenced by any advertising agencies. So how are you going to make sure that they continue with their mandate as opposed to pandering to what their funders, to what their advertising agencies or advertisers are saying?
Okay. I'm not sure if they understood the question.
No, I do.
The household later.
There's a question also.
Okay.
Is it all?
Is it all? Okay, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Tavi. So I will not talk about the incident because it was a national security matter. I will not want you to go and dig it up and talk about it because it threatened national security. So we can't go back there. So if you missed it, you missed it. I'm very happy that you missed it. Okay. And the question around the brand ANC, we had a discussion around the brand ANC. In fact, across all commissions, when we're dealing with the ANC renewal and also on strategy and tactics, I think I don't know if you picked it up when they were doing that. We even received a report because our research team in the ANC went and did a study, a research on the brand, both from members of the ANC, ordinary members of the public, and also what we call influential people, and also So they've done that, we have figures. So the brand ANC now, it has great potential, but it's weak. People love the ANC, but people do not love what the ANC members, leaders, and so forth are doing. And that's where we have contextualized it, and we said, how do we then rebuild the brand ANC in terms of the values of its leadership, in terms of the values of the conduct of its leadership, conduct of its membership. And leadership is across, from branch to national, and membership across the ANC. To say, when you're a member of the ANC, what does it mean? And that's why on the Organizational Renewal Commission, we talk about building a new cadre and Vision 2032 of saying, what do we want a branch of the ANC to do in terms vis-a-vis its mandate, its own ANC processes, but also its positioning in the community that it leads. That the branch of the ANC must lead community issues. It cannot defend, I almost spoke French, it cannot defend untoward things because it's done by its own leaders or its members. The branch of the ANC must be the one that champions service delivery, must hold the councillors to account for services that are not done, must hold ministers, MECs, to account for work that is not done. That is our responsibility as deployed cadres. And that the branch of the ANC must then position itself to say, where the councillors have signed as a pledge, it was not a, what you call it? It was not a tick box exercise. It was a meaningful. So we had that discussion about the brand ANC and its conduct. And to say, how do we then link the love of South Africans about the ANC? Because even when you go, whether it's the veterans and stalwarts of the ANC, whether the elderly who talk about the ANC, they talk about this ANC, but then they say they bemoan the conduct of the ANC members and leaders. And to say, how do we then bring back the brand, the organization, and the conduct of its people? Because yourselves, you are in media and you have done marketing. You cannot separate the brand, the logo, and the people that manage or that are associated with that logo. And it's marketing 101. So we have had that discussion. We acknowledge that we have opportunities to rebuild, and we call it, we are at a moment of consequence. So we must decide what to do with that brand and rebuild that brand. And you raised the issue about the Russian broadcasting TV. It's not banned in South Africa. The issue is that it's transmitted through satellite, which is provided by a private provider who has decided to not have it in their own platform. We cannot. It's not if the SABC was broadcasting. Aggregating, like on DTT, aggregating such platforms, and the RT channel was there, and we're feeding on our own satellite, because even for DSTV, is their satellite feeder who then decided they're not going to allow that to feed through. It's not a decision that MultiChoice has taken, because I inquired as a deployed cadre in that space. They say it's not their decision, it's the decision of the satellite feeder. So if we had our own satellite capability and technology, and at that time we would have, and we're providing for it, we would have allowed it to be fed into South Africa, because we have no problem with Russia ourselves. We have a problem with a system that is not a multilateral system that is being made to become a unilateral system in the world. Yes, of course, there will be 30-year celebrations. I think the appropriate committee that you should have asked is the Arts and Culture one, but we are going to work with them on the 30 years of freedom and democracy celebrations from the communication space, because that's what we lead in that space. And the question that was asked around the public broadcasting mandate vis-a-vis the state broadcaster. And do we have a definitive view? And I want to be very clear on this one. The ANC is the first one to object to a state broadcaster. From our foundations, even during our fight for freedom, we objected to a state broadcaster. We have promoted the values of a public broadcaster. But a public broadcaster must promote what we say national interest. That's why in that resolution we say we must promote the national interest of South Africa, not the interest of a governing party or any other party. And we're saying let's have a discussion as South Africa, not as the ANC. We may lead that discussion, but let's have the discussion to say, what is a public broadcaster, what is it supposed to do? And what are those things that the national broadcaster or the public broadcaster must protect as national interest and promote as national interest, and say this is a no-go, it's because it's in the national interest. And that's a discussion, and that's why we're saying we must have that, we must lead that public discourse. Part of this discussion is opening that debate on the public discourse, but we are not, as the ANC, of any inclination towards a state broadcaster. We don't want a state broadcaster. We want a public broadcaster because a public broadcaster promotes and protects the interests of South Africans. If we want a state broadcaster, we'll establish a state broadcaster and allow the public broadcaster to be a public broadcaster. There's no law that stops us from doing a state broadcaster. But the SABC must be a public broadcaster, and we must have a discussion as South Africans to say what should a public broadcaster do, and what is the national interest that must be protected by a public broadcaster, and therefore that becomes the code for the public broadcaster. That discussion must be had by all of us. And ownership of the media, that's why we're saying there must be transformation of the media. There's been, and remember the current broadcasting and media ownership rules in South Africa puts a particular threshold. There's been push to say, are you going to open and extend, allow non-South Africans to take up more ownership of in the media in South Africa? We're saying no. We want the 40% to be. We want the current percentage to be protected, but we also want ownership by the previously excluded groups in meaningfully. Because if you look the other commercial medias, they're not owned by a majority black people, women, and young people of South Africa. So we're very clear in terms of the transformation. And the question of the Z83 forms, are they still there? I thought they were gone. So officially, we are going, part of the resolution talks about the digitization of government. I'm sure government, when they announce their digitization plan, they'll announce how they're removing the Z83 forms and the timelines for removing the Z83 forms. And then the question on the broadcasting, the household broadcasting levy, you heard us clear. We are removing the ANC supporting the removal of the TV licensing fees for the SABC and introduce a household broadcasting levy. And if you follow the discussions where the government went out on consultation in terms of the SABC bill, around the household broadcasting levy, and the proposal is that the modalities must be found of implementing that household broadcasting levy, and you can interact with the very bill as it goes in Parliament, because it has been sent to Parliament when they do their consultations. And you've heard us right in terms of the history channels and the education channels, sports channels, what we call developmental mandate channels for the country. And we are saying, as the part of the resolutions, there must be a way of funding what we call the public and developmental mandate of the SABC. And those channels are included in that category, and that the commercial part of the SABC must then subsidize that, but the government must find mechanism of funding those channels. Appointment of the SABC board. Currently, the appointment of the SABC board is regulated by the Broadcasting Act of South Africa, and that act, until it's replaced by the SABC Act, when the bill becomes an act, the appointment will go in that way. But even in the act, in the bill that is proposing, there's no Parliament will still play, because we maintain the public mandate. Parliament will still play a key, it will still drive the appointment of the board of the SABC and the interviews that goes with. And related to that question, Parliament only sent the letter on the 20th of December with the recommendations for appointment. Unfortunately, the law says they must be gazetted, and government printers were already closed for gazetting. And remember the rules, there are rules that says you cannot gazette certain things at a particular period. So from the 21st, when it reached us, or when it reached the presidency, government printers were already closed for gazetting. So I'm sure when they reopen now in January, there will be the president will apply his mind, and I'll receive the appointments and I'll gazette, because that's my job. I'm just a letterbox in that space. Yeah, no, January the board should be appointed. The president should appoint, and will gazette. We're just waiting to advise on the. Don't ask me who are the appointees. Yeah, so I do not know. I'm not the appointing authority. I just facilitate the gazetting. And you spoke about the post office to say, is there an acknowledgement that post office has collapsed? And I think I'll take you back to September, October, when we went to the portfolio committee, because we went to cabinet, but went to the portfolio committee, and to explain, we put what we call a repositioning of the post office of tomorrow. And we could not share with the media because it has commercial interest we needed to participate, to protect. The post office since last year, August, has saved or has reduced its overheads, its operational costs by more than 250 million rands as part of its rebuild. Yes, there are challenges in the post office. On Monday, you can join me and the leadership of the post office and the post bank as we go around here in Mangaung. We're visiting the Bloemfontein post office and Tabanchu Post Office and the Post Bank Center, because there are post offices that we are going to revamp immediately because there are limitation of resources. But they were working with National Treasury to fund the post office so that, but where I'm sitting, I'm confident that the post office can be repositioned, and if we are funded and supported, the post office will be the logistic hub of this country and will drive access and participation of SMMEs in the e-commerce space, but also just as a logistics center of the country, but also as a trust authority of the country. For your digital certificates, you're going to need, and digital signatures, you're going to use the post office is taking over, is coming back to play that role as it's mandated by law. And the question around the community media, to say they are the champion of their own communities, is true, and how we're going to protect them from influencers. And if I may go, even if I leave community TVs and deal with community radios, in the country we've got more than 193 community radio stations, but to date I'm sitting with more than 105 that must be shut down, not because of there were issues of licenses where they did not apply for their licenses, because the rules for community media, for community radios, is that if they do not reapply for their license at a particular time, their license is, their frequency is taken away. But commercial media do not have that requirement. If they don't apply, they're given a time to extend to apply for that frequency. So community media, because of where they are already disadvantaged. But secondly, community media, you can't do advertising. There are a whole lot of rules that do not allow them to do advertising. They are not sustainable financially. And as such, they are not able to pay their signaling fees, because the funding of MDDA that is supposed to assist community radio stations and community TV to be viable financially is assisting to establish new community radio stations. Where I come from in Bembe, there are 7 community radio stations. They're not viable. For the same listenership, same population, it's not viable. But if you then allow them to say, if you have proven that you've got an audience, a listenership, and all these other things, and governance, you are allowed not to apply for a commercial radio license without the hassles that you have to do of a 5 million rand that you have to pay to ICAS and all that. Give them progression into that, and then put a requirement to say, and that's why we say we must then find a mechanism to protect them, to say how much is their content going to be influenced by revenue, by advertisers and sponsors and all that, but keep the community nature of that content. Because what community, I use an example of Skhusese FM. At some point, Skhusese FM had the listenership that was bigger than Para FM and Munganalone combined. And that's how popular that radio station was. But that radio station was not financially viable. Even Mohodi FM in Limpopo, I'm just giving the radio stations that I've dealt with in my time in the DIP. But because they could not raise revenue, they could not raise advertisers, they could not raise sponsors for shows, and there were regulations of when you have to. I remember there was a time I took a decision when I was a spokesperson of Limpopo government to say I'm going to advertise in community media, but they were kept their rate of advertising below what is viable. And we cannot allow that. We need to get them to progress so that they can be viable and protect the interest. Because a community media, which is having a commercial, a commercial license, it will be able to generate revenue and promote local content. You do not know Shigi drama that I know from Bembe, because you could not have that broadcasting across. They could not sponsor that show, no matter how educational and educative that show was. But imagine if we had put that health show that is done by, I don't know, between Makado FM and Bembe FM, and put it on and get it sponsors, advertisers and whatever, which was talking about how do you do eye care because we've got glaucoma and whatever, how do you deal with malaria and all those things that are a problem in Limpopo in general, and foot and mouth. When they could raise sponsorship because it had a lot of listenership, that content would have been very, very helpful, not only for Bembe region, but for the entire Limpopo, but also for Mpumalanga and Northwest and adjacent, because now you can stream it. On the DTT platform, these radio stations are already there. We've provided for them to be there, but they must be able to raise revenue. So that's the essence of it. And we're going to look at the modalities of protecting the community content to promote what we call the promotion of local content, local creative skills and opportunities that arise from their viability. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are we all covered? Okay. Now I wanted to understand for my own sake and for the sake of the viewers, the issue of the household levy on the license. Because I think it's one topical issue. Our people are struggling with the payment of licenses and the sustainability of the SABC. Maybe, I'm sure that it's a question of interest out there.
Comrade Pule what we'll do, we'll organize a roundtable discussion around how the household levy will operate, what we are discussing with National Treasury. Yeah. Because even when that proposal is there, we are leaving the modalities of it outside of the Act, so that we can then not bog the Act down on the modalities, but we're acknowledging that the TV license thing is not a viable mechanism of funding the SABC. Thank you.
Okay, did you want to say something?
No, that answer is perfect. I'll wait for the roundtable.
Okay, no, that's fine. Oh, I thought you were saying, why can't we use the one of multi-choice for collection? Zima, Noma Zima, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay. No, thanks, Kumbuzo. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Gavin, but if you need a break, then you can go for the others. So, Okay, can we take ETC? David, we're taking ETC. Can we take ETC? And then after ETC, we take IR. Thanks, Kumbuzo, Mam Regina, Bra Ops, thanks. Can you share the report? Can you send me the report? Yeah.
Una le energy.
What did I do? When I was there that day.
Which day? At 12 o'clock.
Because the these people, you know the reason they're sitting here, they're interested in. So,
Mara, you expected me to address at 12.
Because let me tell you.
We started
running them in the morning. So never go run up. They had the whole day.
It's more.
Half of them never say. It was 90s. Never say it. Okay. We're moving to ETC. So, Comrade Mamuluku, newly elected member of the National Executive Committee, chaired the subcommittee on economic transformation for the 54th National Executive Committee Collective. She's going to take you through on the key resolutions taken by the Economic Transformation Subcommittee. Comrade Mamuluku, over to you. These are members of the media that have been really carrying our story throughout. I know that they did have a dialogue as well yesterday to deal with energy security, so she'll be able to expand even more on those as she deals with the resolutions. Over to you, Comrade Mamuluku.
No, thanks, Comrade Pule. Good afternoon, colleagues from the media, members of the public at large. On economic transformation, we reaffirmed the resolution or the discussion that we held at the policy conference. So quite a number of issues have been reconfirmed from the policy conference. And I think it's important for me to state that. We also reviewed the resolutions of previous conferences. I'll touch on some of them because we utilized the opportunity to report back, but also to give an explanation on some of the changes that we want to see. Starting on the land reform, what we call land, agriculture, and food security. More important issues, I'll flag them. More important issues, we have observed the need to capacitate land bank so that it can be strengthened and be able to deliver on its mandate. We do reaffirm the importance of land bank and support for it. We also reflected on the implementation, or government having to maximize its implementation on the new Expropriation Act, so that we can be able to see implementation of this. And as you know, it's currently on the legislation, it's on the process. The second area that I want to talk about, it's the new Land Reform and Agricultural Development Agency. So we did believe that, or we do believe that we need to bring this agency to assist us
to deal with underutilized land that is currently not productive, that can be able to be productive, or that can be accelerated so that it assists us. So we believe that this agency will assist us to bring private sector and public sector to collaborate properly and be able to work. We reaffirmed the importance of water licenses in terms of ensuring that the agricultural sector operates effectively, and therefore the water license process needed to be speeded up and also improved as part of support for agriculture, but more importantly for rural communities. We also reflected on the rural development, which needs to be more focused around bringing the agriculture, but around other sectors, or we were saying not only on agriculture, but also other sectors. So we currently believe that the strategy around rural development is more focused on agriculture rather than other sectors. So we also spoke about that, a need to ensuring that the sectors are more looked into. We also believe that there is a need to increase productivity of land in communal areas, because currently we do not believe that they are actually being more appropriate. And also we're saying the land redistribution bill must be initiated, and this will assist us to facilitate equitable access to land based on the needs of the people of the country. We also talk about the land redistribution bill to assist us for the state to acquire agricultural land for purposes of redistribution to previously disadvantaged persons, but also this should be done in the spirit of constitutional principle of equitable access to land. And also that the legislation needs to be clear for beneficiaries of land that is redistributed, and also should include people who are working on that land, such as farm workers, farm dwellers, and more importantly, aspirant small-scale and commercial farmers. We're saying that the state must ensure that they apply the principles of just and equitable compensation when acquiring land for the benefit of persons and entities who meet the criteria for land. Here we reported on the basis. We also
where?
People coming up and down and we
Can we assist Remenyana because I don't think already it's necessary. So because the people you are trying to cater are the ones that you are distracting. So
okay.
Can we proceed?
Apologies about that. I think the people are trying to make sure that they cater for you, you are looked after.
You want to make sure that.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
no,
okay.
it's fine.
No, thanks for that.
Apologies about that.
Okay. Yes, Gavin.
If you could take it from the land redistribution bill.
Okay.
Or you don't want them to just start?
Land redistribution. Okay. On the issue, we are saying that a land redistribution bill should be initiated, and this will address the following. It will address the issue of access to land based on the needs of the people of South Africa. So we are saying it should be equitable so that we address the anomaly of majority of the people not having access to land. You'd note that now we are breaking down in terms of what needs to be done in terms of land. You can see we're talking about underutilized land and then how that should be focused on that and the agriculture. We're talking about redistribution land. I spoke about the issue of, okay, let me just be sure that I've covered all. The issue of redistribution issue in terms of ensuring that the agricultural state must acquire agricultural land for the purposes of distribution to previously disadvantaged communities or individuals, so that we are able to address the issues of access to land by previously disadvantaged individuals.
but also this we're saying it must be done in the spirit of the Constitution. And then again, we are talking about a clear legislative criteria for beneficiaries of land that is distributed by the state. Again here, when we talk about this, we are saying, when we talk about beneficiaries as well, more attention must be given, especially for those who are currently working the land, farm dwellers, because it's unfair that you find that people have been working the land, but when it's redistributed, they are not being considered. Farm dwellers, farm workers that end up being actually evicted in these areas. And then the issue here as well is support for small-scale and commercial farmers who are from previously disadvantaged communities. Then we talk about that in all these things, we must make sure that the spirit of the Constitution is upheld. Now, part of what we have done at conference was to explain, you remember that the last resolution, as I said, we also looked at the resolution. The last resolution was on the amendment of the Constitution. And we gave report on what has happened in Parliament in terms of the process, that we were not able to amend the Constitution on the basis that we did not have two-thirds majority, but we currently believe that the Constitution and the laws that are there are able to allow us to expropriate with or without compensation. And that's why you can see this work that we are doing in emphasis on the areas, not only land for human settlements, because that has been taken care of, access to land for human settlements in terms of state-owned land. Currently, we are doing that, redistributing and making sure that that land is available. On privately owned land that is suitable for human settlements, if it's not availed for us at a price, we are able to expropriate with or without compensation. So that we believe that it's already taken care of. And that's why you can see the focus is more on the gaps that exist around land, agriculture, but also we link in this to food security. Moving to the next area, energy security and just energy transition. What we have resolved here, or what has been one of the flagging issues, and I said even when we were talking in conference, that this normally is not what comes out of conference. But delegates felt that there needs to be a unified message and clear communication, lack of contradiction from all employees of the ANC, leaders within the party and outside in terms of government. Emphasis was that a unified, based on the resolution of conference, unified message based on the decisions. So they were raising concerns around contradictory messages that sometimes comes from party leaders, sometimes comes from government leaders. So this was the first point that was emphasized around energy and the issue of energy security and just energy transition. Then there was an issue that just transition plans must be developed for all sectors of the economy, and regions such in the country such as Mpumalanga, which are highly affected, should be considered, and it must be done in the pace and scale that does not compromise the economy and the people. So re-emphasis that energy transition is important, but it must be done in the manner that it doesn't compromise the country. Urgent decisions are needed to upgrade the transmission infrastructure so that we are able to connect renewable and other generation capacity. There should be a renewed focus on demand-side management as a short to medium-term intervention to achieve demand reductions. I'm going to go into detail because I know these are some of the areas that even the public is interested in, so that they can hear on energy specifically what is it that we are saying, because there are quite specific recommendations that we have been asked to do. And I must say, conference and delegates were very, very strong to say load shedding must stop. And government must ensure that we respond to this urgently and implement the decisions urgently to stop load shedding, because it affects households, individuals, business, and also the economy. But also more important, they were saying it contributes even to things such as the security of the country and gender-based violence. Another issue that was referred here was that there is a need to, when we face crisis of energy, that emergency procurement should be considered and implemented without delays. The restructuring of ESCOM's unsustainable debt must be undertaken as a matter of agency and priority, which has been a decision. This was reaffirmed, and this was said to overcome the issue of load shedding, but more importantly for ESCOM as well to play a role in just energy transition. So conference felt that ESCOM should not be a bystander, but must have a role to play in this transition. The other issue that was raised is that adequate coal plants maintenance, coupled with development of the skills base, including sourcing external skills, is required to bring power stations into operation. This was a reflection noting that the current power stations are not functioning optimally, and that's why we have load shedding. And the issue here was that we need to close the gap in terms of current demand issues and stop load shedding. As I said, that they said we need to stop load shedding. And therefore, that's why they were saying the current coal plants needs to be brought to full capacity so that they deal with the issue of prevention of load shedding and energy supply while we're dealing with the issue of long-term sustainability of energy supply. The investment plans of the Just Energy Transition Partnership should be effectively implemented, and further resources must be mobilized to fund electricity generation and transmission investment in a manner that includes both grants and highly concessional financing. This was said that it shouldn't be at the expense of the fiscus. It must be affordable, it must be transparent, and it must be in the manner that it assists us to achieve our objectives. I spoke about the issue of skills. There was an issue that we must update the IRP, but the process must be transparent. That's the emphasis there, because we know that the decision of updating of the IRP has been taken, but the emphasis by conference is that it must be transparent, especially on the modeling system that is being used, so that when we get these key options in terms of what is being given in terms of allocation of megawatts to each technology, it must be transparent on how it has been done. Regulations should be put in place to enable municipalities to partner with IPPs so that they can utilize this not only to respond to demand in local areas, but also as a source of revenue in terms of municipalities. You know that some of the municipalities have been advocating for this. It is now a resolution in terms of the decision. And this, we're saying that government must look into it as well, but also in the manner that it does not compromise the revenue generation of ESCOM. So it must be a balance, working together to ensure that that is done. And then another issue was that major trading partners of South Africa has classified gas and nuclear as green in the energy transition. And therefore, it is important for us as we do adaptation that we consider this and include it as part of what we can be able to utilize to positively impact on the overall energy security, but also on pricing. Because we do believe that if we have alternative energy technologies, it will not only assist in the energy security, but also the issue of pricing came to say the current energy costs are not affordable to households, and that's why you must bring all these models that will create an opportunity to bring down the costs that we are currently seeing. And then there was an issue around the implementation, fast-tracking the implementation of the oil and gas exploration, because we believe that this will not only respond to the capacity of the country in terms of energy security, but also the issue of revenue generation and competitiveness of the country in the global space. The other issue that was there was supportive policy measures to enable South Africa to become a green hydrogen center, which is very critical for us. And then on the recent hydrocarbon discoveries of South Africa in the southeastern coast, it was resolved as follows: that development of this field should be geared towards creating options for related power plants based in this gas resources, and also the issue of conducting feasibility studies to make sure that we have new domestic refinery capacity, noting the concerns around the closure of these refinery capacities that we currently have, and then that we have BRICS relations that we must leverage in the energy space to be able to benefit but to be supported as a country. So we are saying as we chair BRICS this year, part of what we must achieve, which we want to influence from the economy and economic transformation, is that let's utilize the BRICS relationship to be able to enable this sector to grow, but also ensure that the partnership between our state-owned entities and BRICS state-owned entities can be leveraged to assist us going forward. Now we move out of that area. We go on to the green energy. We resolve that mobilize support for the climate change bill, which aims to help South Africa respond to realities of climate change, including the increased risk of droughts and floods, and guide the country onto more sustainable and climate resilient path. The issue here again that South Africa must enhance its strategies and develop its own production capacity so that it's able to benefit out of the global green energy value chains, so that we're just not consumers, but we can also be able to participate in the value chains and be production spaces. The other area that we should not make the mistakes of the past, where we do not utilize our advantage for here, it's mapping strategies on minerals for the green manufacturing and ensuring that South Africa does not repeat mistakes of the past, as to date has been the case with other minerals, where we are exporting everything, we do not even have the capacity to, we beneficiating limited within this. Policy and legislation around minerals for green manufacturing and development for the region, and continental agreements around these minerals is important. So as part of benefiting in the green energy space. And then we do have a resolution around electrical vehicles. I note we did have the conversation in conference, because some of them will say, do we have to talk about electric vehicles when we don't have electricity for household? The issue here was that we acknowledged that we were one of the first countries that developed, for example, models of electric vehicles, which we should have been ahead the curve. We did not utilize that advantage, and therefore we delayed. And one of the examples at the time, Minister Pandor was in science and technology. We launched a model that we were working on. And the issue here is that, one, if we do not start developing, because as part of the manufacturing of motor vehicles as a country, it means we'll be closed out in terms of competition in the global market. So there's that need for us to ensure that we don't lose in the EV manufacturing industry capacity, but also we raise the issue that the same incentives that exist in the current manufacturing capacity of motor vehicles should be able to also be translated on the EV, so that we can be able to participate, and also ensure that we start building in terms of infrastructure in the country as part of the areas that can create jobs and grow the economy. On macroeconomic policy, on the fiscal policy, ongoing measures to avoid rising national debt and related fiscal crisis must continue to guide our approach to fiscal policy. Government must use fiscal policy effectively to intensify the fight against poverty and inequality. So meaning that how we utilize our fiscal strength and our fiscal tool as government, it should be in fighting poverty, unemployment and inequality. But also here it was the issue that we currently have a lot of consumption spending as government, and we need to move into the spaces where we deal with infrastructure maintenance and investment. There's still the issue around wealth tax that must be explored further than where we currently have, for example, in the property space. On monetary policy, the issue of the private ownership of the Reserve Bank was observed, that it continues to be an anomaly, as you saw with our documents in the policy, that we continue to say in a long term it has to be corrected, but we are saying it shouldn't be at the expense of the fiscus. So we continue to say government must explore on this matter, look at what we can do, because we noted, we reported to conference that when we took this resolution, then the speculators, the prices went up, and we are saying we should not enrich the speculators at the expense of the country, and that's why it must be done in a responsible way. And one of the issues that was discussed is to say we reaffirmed the independence of the South African Reserve Bank based on the Constitution. That has been reaffirmed. And another issue was that the South African Reserve Bank should implement monetary policy in a balanced manner, taking into account growth, employment, and exchange rate factors. That's the resolution. On financial sector transformation, there is a feeling that we need to do a lot of pushing in this area, especially around access to capital, particularly for SMMEs, women and youth-owned enterprises. The transformation of the financial sector should include gender and race in terms of ownership for financial institutions, but also must include the transformation and diverse allocation of capital from black banks along race, gender, and geospatial lines. There is a strong feeling that access to capital, access to finance, access to support, especially in this country, continues to follow the historical disadvantages. So there is a feeling that continuously the previously advantaged individuals continue to benefit more than the previously disadvantaged individuals. And there's a strong feel that there is a need for us to pay more attention into this area, and the call for government to strengthen regulations, to strengthen legislation to ensure transformation in this area. And also that institutions such as PIC should be able to assist us in the transformation in where they hold shareholding, because these are funds of workers and all those previously disadvantaged areas, individuals that can help us to transform the financial institution. Comrade Komboso would have spoken about, spoke about the issue of State Bank. We do re-emphasize the need for it to continue, and we must fast track, but we are saying it must be capitalized. And then the other areas that's around fintech startup sector to be supported. And we are saying here it's not only around support in terms of access to capital, but also in terms of protecting their users, but also rewards in terms of innovation and access to the market. I need to move faster. Am I not taking too long? Okay. On social grants, you would have noted previously that economic cluster would have at some point differed with social clusters in terms of provision for basic income grant and also the issues around support for this area. We noted that learning from COVID-19 interventions, it did provide support and relief for households. So the need for support for families in terms of alleviation of poverty as part of our work, we're saying it's important, and therefore the importance of this work needs to be supported, and therefore we are saying it should be implemented, and also basic incomes as much as the fiscal space can allow. So we are saying to government, they must go and find modalities to implement this, but it must be done in the responsible manner. But we are saying we support this area of work because we've seen how it has been able to increase moving people out of living below poverty lines. And also we're saying there must be more focus in terms of the fiscal to support public employment programs. We've seen what it has been able to do in dealing with poverty and unemployment in our communities. Another area more emphasis is around on SMMEs, cooperatives, township and rural economies, and informal sector. We've resolved that we need to remove the macro enterprises from small businesses. So the proposal here is that the small business must be packed together with informal businesses or informal sector, and then the macro moves out of that space. Whether this translate to a department being reconfigured, government can deal with that. But we believe that in terms of the requirements currently, what we see as requirements for macro enterprises, when they are clubbed together with small, it becomes a burden on small businesses. And this is more around removal of red tapes. Part of the issue that we talk about here is that, for example, we don't want to see a situation whereby informal traders in the country, when they go and put up their stalls and all that, they continue to be chased by metro policies in these metros. So we are saying there should be a conducive environment for informal sector to operate, and we've seen how it can be able to stimulate some level of economic activity in many of the countries on the continent. And We differed with the security cluster here, because the security cluster, and we said to them, let's find a mechanism, perhaps in the implementation, how it's done. The security cluster is raising concerns about the informality in townships of the small businesses that are operating, your township taverns, your township spazas. And they are sort of wanting to say, can we have some level of regulatory? And this is on the basis of public, where South Africans are saying, we have foreign nationals who are operating spazas and all those things. And our concern is that if you start putting some level of compliance regulator, it means an informal, a mother who sells tomatoes and bananas must go to a municipality to go and get a permit to operate. This could mean queues, long queues, days of the permits that is not going, and the municipality might even end up putting some level of a levy to be paid for this, and that's what we don't want from an economic point of view. We believe all this regulatory burden on operations of businesses, especially small businesses and informal traders, are a burden for operation, and we don't support them. So we are saying we'll have to find mechanism to reconcile this contradiction in terms of within government and also as we discussed. But our view is that the red tape must be removed for operation, and even for example, some of the discussion was that those of us who are in human settlements, as we develop new communities, we must create environment where already you build areas for traders to be able to operate, so that it's conducive for them not to find themselves under their umbrella when it rains, when it's sun, but it must be allocated to showcase that we are supporting these areas of work. I thought I must emphasize that. Develop a national strategy for macro enterprises, which will include development of Microfinancing Act. This was one of the resolutions I think we had previously, if I'm not mistaken, in the Stellenbosch conference. It dropped in other resolutions. We've brought it back because we think it's very critical and we would want to see it being implemented. We are saying the DDM model must be employed to empower communities, especially around the cooperatives in the communities, because this is an area that we could be able to support. Then an issue around here, participation of communities in township and rural areas must be facilitated by government. A conducive environment to created for small businesses to thrive. I have spoke about this. I spoke about this in terms of infrastructure, including how we build in communities. And then the other area you'd have had Comrade Regina speaking about the skills. We focus on the skills for the economy. Now here we are saying there is a need for us to pay attention to the skills for the economy, deal with the issue of the rural brain drain, because currently what we see as a challenge is that we pay attention to the country's brain drain, where we're losing skills from the country outside, but we do not pay attention to the brain drain from rural areas to urban areas, where we end up with, for example, if we say local economic development, you do not see you do not have the communities in the rural areas having the skills to be able to do the economic activities. Then we talk about there is a need for us, we're supporting the work that is being proposed by higher education on the TVET colleges, because we believe that this category, if you know, the TVET colleges start from what we call standard 8. I forgot, standard 8.
Grade 10.
It's grade 10, okay. Grade 10. If we look at grade 10 and going up, if we are able to start introducing technical skills that the children, when they leave, even matric, for example, grade 12, they are able to utilize that to enter the work market, so that we don't have this majority of young people who are unemployed and unskilled and unemployable. So that's part of why we are emphasizing this from an economic point of view, to say if you look at the future of work, it's more on technical capacity. And that's why this area of work we think should be supported more intensively, so that it can be able to produce for the economy. So that's what we are emphasizing around that area of work. And then we go into innovation and fourth industrial revolution, would have been touched by Comrade Kumbutso, but we believe that there is a need for government to facilitate and create innovation ecosystem that brings together entrepreneurs, investors, and funding institution and research institution together at one point. what we see in many countries. We've tried it with innovation hubs, but it's not bringing all this that we want to see in one hub. So we are re-emphasizing it that, for example, you need apps, you need tools, you need gaming. All this, if you are able to have, for young people to explore their capabilities in these centers that you create together, will be able to unleash the potential of young people in the country. So we're talking about innovation, creating platforms for innovation to thrive, so that we don't continue to acknowledge and celebrate people who are outside the country doing well when we could be able to do this. And then we're saying the work that is done by Presidential Commission on Fourth Industrial Revolution must be supported and enhanced. And again here we are saying a country that does not invest more on R&D, there is no way that you can be competitive in terms of the economy. So we are re-emphasizing that as part of innovation and fourth industrial revolution, specifically for the future in terms of that. On infrastructure, I can say we didn't do much changes from the last one in policy conference. I think we re-emphasized the importance of infrastructure development, but more here, what we are talking about is that we should be able to develop infrastructure that is climate resilient going forward. So we think that as we go forward, what we are saying in terms of conference is that going forward, whatever infrastructure that is being put must be climate resilient. And then the need for us to retrospect in terms of going forward, the infrastructure that we currently have that will have to be upgraded to respond to the climate environment is critical. That's what we are emphasizing here, beyond what you've seen in policy conference. And then the issue of security of the economy, again, re-emphasize what we said in the last conference, dealing with construction mafias, the issues around infrastructure, infrastructure dealing. Here, I must say, conference which we want to emphasize, conference re-emphasize the issue of dealing with the scrap metal. So in the current document, when we circulate, we are currently updating it, Comrade Pule, based on the editions will be coming in. So that issue came in. On transformation, empowerment, and preferential procurement, the issue empowerment is triple BEE. We re-emphasize the importance of triple BEE and implementation. On our observation, we believed that the current criticism and objection to BEE, triple BEE, are not basically because the policy is bad, are more around the inefficiencies of implementation. And for example, an example we made that you find somebody makes an application, it takes 24 months for approval, and therefore deters investors who wants to partner with local businesses in the country. Second issue was around the notion that those who are connected are the ones that benefit. But when we look at majority of the sectors, we've seen quite a number of people who have benefited and actually thriving in terms of BE benefits. So that's why we re-emphasize the importance of empowerment, and that in order for us to transform, empowerment remains critical. We still have the economy of the country in the 5%, in the hands of 5% of the economy, of the population of the country. Then we also talk about the issue of preferential procurement policy, that it will assist us in terms of fast tracking, in terms of transformation. Here we're looking at, for example, we are saying on the procurement, we want to see procurement targets being set aside for women-owned businesses, youth-owned and managed businesses, business for people living with disabilities, and military veterans supported. We also have an issue that we said military veterans currently, all we do, you have seen with security cluster, they talk about provision of support. You'd see on social transformation, they talk, for example, on housing for military veterans. We do believe that there should be economical activities that are supported for military veterans, so that, especially around SMMEs and cooperatives, so that they just don't become dependent on the state, but can be active in the economy of the country. So there are quite a number of things that we are saying should be looked at. The other area here we have observed around transport in terms of transformation, that the BRT system is meant to empower the taxi industry as part of transforming the transport sector. Now, what we are observing is that in terms of the Act, it currently has some constraints. Many of the BRT contracts are coming to an end and are leaving those that were meant to be benefit, because it was on a pilot, not having really been empowered. Now, part of what we are saying is that the Land Transport Act should be reviewed to strengthen the empowerment aspect of the Act, especially on BRT systems business models across the country. Again, we are saying give new direction. So we are saying government must give new direction for the implementation and extension of the bus rapid transport system across the country in order to ensure that the empowerment aspect of the program continues to be effective. So we are worried. The reports that we are getting around this in major of the metros is that they have now almost are going for bidding competitive measures where even those that have been taken out of the taxi industry now are left without nothing and no longer that long-term empowerment like we are doing with all the other sectors. So we would want to see this area being addressed. The other issues around market concentration, especially in the retail sector. There was an observation that the big retailers have now gone to dominate and displace your previously like family businesses in township and rural areas. And they said the issue here is that we must look into this and protect and facilitate for access to value chains for small businesses and independent retailers and wholesalers in township and rural communities. But we are saying as well, there must be policies that are in local government level to reconfigure the space and open up critical infrastructure for retail activities, especially in township and local areas. Malls in township and all this must be, should procure, we are saying we must emphasize that they need to procure some of their goods from the local communities, which we are also emphasizing. I think that's, and then the other area which we did touch on, reaffirmed our position in terms of the policy conference on tourism. You would have noted that tourism as part of the transformational areas, but also access for the majority and protection of work. We reaffirmed our policies there. We also reaffirmed the policy conference decision on aviation. It's there, but we have been requested to bring back the issue of oceans economy, which as we update our documents, Comrade Pule, will bring into that area to say it's one of the areas we are a country that has quite huge coastal area that we must continue to benefit out of. The maritime as well as part of the area, it should be. On social compacting, we reaffirmed the need in terms of all the issues that we reflected during policy conference. Just one addition from policy conference, which was not there, is there is a need, conference decided that there's a need to review NETLEC in terms of how it's configured now and how it's functioning to ensure that it can be able to assist us going forward. Then the issue of we need to convene an economic and energy summit, alliance summit, to ensure that the alliance partners speak in one voice in a cohesive manner in terms of this area of the economy and on energy. On trade and industry, the issues around localization and procurement instruments are re-emphasized from policy documents. The issue of African continental trade are reaffirmed by conference in terms of supporting the country, but ensuring that our private sector can benefit on the continent. And also the issue of industrialization has been reaffirmed. The other issue here, which is new, is that we said that we must utilize state-owned entities, especially research institutions such as CSIR and MINTEC, to assist us in growing and expanding our capabilities in manufacturing. Limit exports of raw material, especially strategic minerals, implementing anti-dumping measures, especially once energy security has been restored, to facilitate for beneficiation of these activities. On digital economy, we reaffirmed the decisions on policy conference, more emphasis again that we need to have cybersecurity strengthened, to ensure that we protect personal data, government databases, and state-owned entities. Then Kumbuzo spoke about this thing. On state-owned entities, here we reaffirmed the decision of the policy conference on a comprehensive review of South Africa's state-owned entities portfolio to determine the balance of evidence which should be retained, consolidated, or repositioned. In terms of those state-owned entities, we reaffirmed it. I think it's important. And then again, there was an issue that the state-owned entities must be taken in terms of where their portfolios are. So the conference said, for example, you would have to have Transnet moving into transport, you'd have had to have ESCO moving into energy, for example, those issues. The debate was more, will it address the efficiencies, will it assist? So that debate raged, but the decision here and government to look at modalities and the time frame around it. So that's a decision that has been taken. Then there's an issue around the logistics. It was recognized that for us to be able to grow the economy, the logistics needs to be paid attention to. I can't remember if we had it in terms of, we did brief you around this, but here specifically, we might not have coined it logistics, but here specifically it's around government must ensure that rail and port infrastructure efficiency is improved to enable to handle the export volumes, especially from the mining and agricultural sector, noting the complaints that have been there, and then the issue around logistics infrastructure services to support communal transport, so strengthening of Prasa role in the communities, it was emphasized. So there's quite paying attention on some of the entities, and on logistics again, on aviation, to say that we should be able to expand on our capacity for cargo and aviation logistics around that. So that I've touched, but also the issue of strengthening of the role of AXA to be able to play and also benefit in terms of the African free trade. On issues around or a review of network infrastructure ownership, management and responsibility should be undertaken. On African free trade, it's more around ensuring that our DFIs benefit more and we are positioning them better to be able to have a better role to play on the continent so that we are not bystanders in terms of benefiting, but also we can be a global hub for the African continent. I think those are the issues that Comrade Pule have covered on the ETC. Thank you very much.
No, thanks, and thanks for the comprehensive presentation on resolutions and some of the key discussions that took place. I'm sure this was one topical commission that, as and when we met with the media, they kept on raising issues that revolved around the ETC. So there you are now. Nomazima. I got your name right this time. Okay. Huh? Yeah, I know. I wanted to make sure I don't make a mistake. Okay. Mawande, Puti, Gavin. Okay, we can start with Firian Glendaf. Are you? Okay, you want to start?
Yes, can I?
Yeah, you can start.
Of the whole conference.
Yes, for the whole I mean, it's your inaugural question for sure. Gerrit. It's Gerrit, no?
Okay.
Okay.
Can we start? Then your decision on the reserve bank, isn't that a step back from the decision taken in 2017 when you decided to nationalize the reserve bank? It doesn't seem that radical now anymore, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Christian?
Christian from NETAP. I would also like to add to that, it also seems like with the resolution on expropriation with compensation is also a step back. Would you also describe that as a step back? And yes, that's it.
There's a question here from the econ desk. They're asking about the timelines around the reconfiguration of SOEs to the portfolios. When can we expect to see the changes?
I wanted to ask about informal traders and possibly structural improvements. I wanted to ask what is the rationale behind that, because it's not as if they go, anyways, in some instances, some permits are for maybe 5 years, and at a municipal level, it also controls fuels on the streets so that people can actually, besides traders, so that pedestrians can actually walk on the streets and that there's not an influx of many informal traders. And it's also, it helps municipalities regulate and know how many people are actually trading. So I wanted to ask the rationale behind the ANC wanting to scrap the payment of permits for these informal traders.
Okay, Namazima Gavin.
Thank you so much for the opportunities. Gordon Nichols from Newsroom Africa, Channel 405. Mr. Member, I do have a few questions. Does the initiation of the land redistribution bill to assist the state to acquire agricultural land for the purposes of redistributing it to previously disadvantaged people mean that you want a bill to help you expropriate land, farms, and then give those farms to previously disadvantaged people? What does to help to assist the state to acquire agricultural land mean? Moving on to energy, you said that there's an urgent decisions are needed to upgrade the transmission of infrastructure to connect renewable and other energy sources. Did the conference resolve on whether South Africa should be building transmission lines to bring in gas or other fossil fuels? Has the conference decided whether it wants South Africa to build a nuclear power plant? You have said that the partnership between state-owned entities of BRICS countries should be leveraged to respond to the energy crisis. Does that mean we should go back to Russia and ask them to build a nuclear power plant, or ask China to help with a gas plant, or India? You've acknowledged that South Africa, I'll just wait a second. You've acknowledged that South Africa has lost a competitive advantage with the development of electric vehicles. Are you calling for the return of the jewel? And then I must have misheard it. Maybe this is incorrect. Did I hear that the conference has resolved that it wants specific procurement targets set aside for military veterans? That should be legislated. Does that include military veterans from the apartheid era who were then inculcated into the SANDF and who would now have access to preferential procurement targets from the new dispensation? Thank you.
Okay. Sure. We do so inside politics.
Stupid. Because I'm typing as well. I'll forget the questions.
Yeah. Let's just give her time to.
Okay.
To just, she's just capturing the question, so she does justice to that.
Yeah. Let's move.
Okay.
Okay. First question on that. What necessitated the review? What are the problems? What are the challenges there? If you could share with us. The second one, you spoke about transformation of the financial services sector. And you mentioned PSC. What is the role of the state there? Are you not relegating your responsibility of the state to play a bigger role there? And the last one,
just repeat that. On the PSC?
On the PSC. Okay. You want PSC to play a particular role. Are you not then? So the question is, what is the role of the state itself in ensuring greater transformation of the financial services sector? The last one is that maybe I missed it. What is the resolution of the state there?
Okay, Mawande?
Sure.
Just a second, Hajan, just a second.
Yo, Mawande. Carlos, you have got a book of questions.
No, I want to go for it, please.
Hey, you want to do it? You want it? Okay, you can proceed.
Sure. On the issue of social grants, there's a part where you say the African system of social grants and what the payment should be protected from inflationary pressures, particularly that protected from inflationary pressures. What do you mean in simple terms with that? And then secondly, on the issue of the PIC, the fact that talks about PIC playing an activist role. Also, can you expand on that? What does it mean as a lady like myself? And then on energy, it sounds like we have seen The reason I'm saying that, no, I'm saying it sounds like you don't have a clear resolution on energy. And here's why I'm saying that. On one side, we are talking about moving to renewables. On the other end, we are talking about upgrading to modern day technology and coal power stations. What exactly is the energy revolution of the ANC? Also, you start to blame the aging coal stations for pollution. Is that correct? Is that what I had? Yeah.
So it's coal-fired power stations. Okay, yeah. No, but Mawanda, you really had your tray full this time around.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. You outdid Gavin. Almost great special awards for who asked the most questions. Christian, you want to be added?
I'm the winner of asking, the one who was asked the least question.
Yeah?
Yeah, there was the winner for the one who asked the least question.
Least question.
Yeah, no, you do. Professor?
Sure. Can you just expand or maybe just tell us why the resolution to move SOEs from DPE? Is it an indictment on the performance of the ministry? And then what happens to DPE once all of these SOCs or SOEs have moved? Is Minister Pravin Gordhan the final or last minister of DPE? Thank you.
Is that the last one?
Okay. That's the last one.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. I'm going to clap the one around, I think it's, let me just pull them back. Heard and on the issue whether we're no longer radical on both the issue of the land, expropriation of land, and the issue of the Reserve Bank. When I started, I said that we reaffirmed the previous decisions. But what comes out is that what are the lessons that have been learned, both in terms of land and also in terms of the Reserve Bank. And the issue is, what is it that we want to have as the end game? So while you're dealing with the issue, for example, of expropriation without compensation in the Act and the constitutional amendment, we are saying we currently do not have two-thirds majority. Does that hold us back from doing what we expected? And that's why we paid attention to some of these issues that we are seeing. It could be just wording. That sounds like we've toned down. We haven't. Or maybe how I presented, we haven't. The issue of the Reserve Bank as well, you'd hear that we reaffirmed, I said that. We reaffirmed that, but we're saying it shouldn't be to the advantage of the speculators and to the disadvantage of the fiscals. So that's what we are saying. So while we're looking, what is it that we want to achieve with the Reserve Bank is to be able to assist us both in terms of inflation targeting, dealing with the issue of management of the economy, dealing with unemployment issues. So that's what is the critical emphasis that we are putting now. To say, can we move a step further and deal with what we want to deal with? I hope I've been able to answer that properly. Now, I'll go, then that is the issue of the time frames on SOEs. We as the ANC, we set policy and allow for government to go and implement. So we are requesting government to say, this is what we are saying. So government must go and ourselves in terms of issue of, it wouldn't be in the policy document, but you put time frames. But we know as a resolution is that it must happen within these 5 years. Now, when we go to Mahotla, for example, we start putting that into a program of action. This is what must happen now, this is what must happen. So that process is coming. So that's why you'd see with us, all these resolutions don't have time frame. So we'll take the resolution into a program of action as ANC after Lekgotla, January, end of the month. We'll say out of Lekgotla, these are the resolutions from conference, we must go and implement. And then we put together time frames. Out of that, then they will be taken to government by the deployees, where they start saying, okay, what can be implemented there, they start putting in. That's the process. Whether, and I'm linking that, how long that will be done, it's government that will pronounce how it's going to implement the decision of the ANC on state-owned entities. When does that happen? Whether the current DPE gets dissolved or not, that's not where we are sitting as ANC. We are saying there is a need for this, and the discussion was quite robust. I mean, some of the people were asking, what is it addressing? Your state-owned entities, for example, the ones that we're talking, understand that we're talking about the rationalization of the state-owned entities. But some of them are playing a critical role in the infrastructure development of the country. They assist us in terms of GDP growth. So those work, part of the issue was, will it not move into the departments where you start finding that the inefficiencies of those departments drag it down? So there was those conversations. And that's why government must go and look at the modalities to ensure that what we are trying to address with the anomaly and feeling of the conference, that currently, for example, the challenges in ESCOM would be in terms of, for example, the pronouncement where policy sitting that side, the implementation is this side, that there is no synchrony. It's what is being tried to be addressed. And therefore, government has a responsibility to ensure that the efficiencies happen and do not hamper what conference and delegates are wanting to see as an efficient institutions that are assisting in the developmental mandate. So I'm hoping that that part as well is incorporated, because quite a number, I think, asked about it, and I'm just clapping them together, those that are the same. And then coming to informal traders. Look, the issue here is that there are inefficiencies as well in local government. Part of what you would have seen as an outcry, for example, from communities would have been when a mother is sitting in the corner selling bananas, making a living for the children, and being taken, that stock being taken and thrown out. And what comes back as feedback from our communities, our constituencies, and delegates is to say, this is inhumane. You are not able to ensure that everybody can be employed, and therefore there are those people who are able to make a living out of this. Therefore, create a conducive environment for them to operate. So part of what we are reflecting upon, and the same thing, is it affordable for this woman who's selling fat cakes on the side to be paying to sell those fat cakes? It's not. That's the reality. Why should we take from the most vulnerable and the people who are the poor, the poorest of the poor in our country? Majority who are, by the way, black women who are the face of poverty in this country. Why must we continue to take and make them worse off? And that's what we are reflecting upon as this commission and as conference, to say, create conducive environment, don't overburden them by the need to go and queue, because the day they go to queue at the municipality, if it's efficient for those permits to be issued for 5 years, it's fine. But what we are against as the people in conference and as ANC is when you find that they spend the whole day, because the experiences are saying, they spend the whole day queuing, and on that day they are losing a trading day. They go there, they are requested to pay, and it's up to the municipality to decide how much they pay. 200 is a lot of money for a person who's selling fat cakes. Now, to me and you, it might seem that it's a minimum fee, and that's what we are calling for the review of. Informal traders must be allowed to operate in a more efficient way. We do not differ with the issue of conducive environment, where they do not hamper, they do not make the cities dirty, the way they do not. That's why we even said the reflection was even saying, you as human settlements, for example, when you develop new settlements, Create an area, for example, in the entrance of that settlement where you are building 15,000 houses, units. Then create a place where they can have a shelter and actually sell. When you build taxi rank, you know they are going to sell because people are passing there. Create a conducive environment for these informal traders to already have a place to sell. And that's what we are saying. So it's not necessarily to say there shouldn't be law and order within municipalities. We're not saying there shouldn't be control. We are for control, but remove red tape for small businesses and SMME. In other countries, just to make an example, you know, for SMMEs, if you register a company, immediately, by the time you register as an SMME, you get your tax clearance, you get everything because you are operating within time. As you generate your revenue and report, then your bank accounts are linked based on your income, and therefore that's why countries such as your Kenyas have M-Pesas, because it's a platform that is created for informal traders to be able to function effectively. That's what we are calling for as ANC, to say, let's create a conducive environment. It's for far too long that this sector is not created and is not supported to be conducive. Another example, during level 5, level 4 lockdown, these are the people that we closed out from operation. Because there was no regulation, no law, no environment conducive for us even to provide support for them. And these are the lessons that we are carrying towards the future. So I thought I should emphasize, I know I'm going too much about this thing. It's become my passionate area now, learning in terms of the people who are operating in this area and what other countries are doing. Maybe moving into what Mawande is asking, social grant, inflationary pressures. What we are raising here is that more in simple terms should not burden the state. That's simple as it is. It could be maybe the wording that we used. But we are saying it must be affordable. Let's try and make sure that it doesn't become a burden that is not affordable. That's what we are saying. Linking it to your face, Emma. On PIC activist role, what we are saying here, it's not, we might have named PIC, but we think our DFIs are not playing a role that assists us in the developmental agenda. That's what we mean. They should be able to fund in terms of some of these transactions that are assisting to transform deliberately, to alter the markets, to alter the sectors. And we do not think that there's that paying attention specifically to assist us, especially in the financial sector. That's the activist role that we are calling for. We don't seem to have clear decision and solution. On energy, our policy remains of a mix, where coal has a role, renewables has a role, nuclear has a role, gas has a role. And that does not mean that we are not acknowledging the transition that we have to do from high carbon emissions to low carbon emissions. And because it's a transition, you can't get away with what you currently have. What conference said to us is that it is important to keep the lights on. And keeping the lights on means that what you have currently as infrastructure, make sure that it helps you to keep the lights on while you are building towards the future. So there isn't confusion. We're saying currently we are here, the economy is battling, households are battling, everybody else is not happy with the current energy supply. We can't be. And I was saying, we were talking, somebody say, we don't want even this level 1 or level, but stage 1 or stage 2. We just don't want load shedding. And therefore, currently utilize what we have as infrastructure. And you'd have seen, yesterday we had a dialogue. And part of what is coming there, all of us, everybody, you would have thought that people who are sitting, for example, because sometimes we coin people pro-coal, pro-renewable. But everybody who are sitting there, who previously would have been coined either way, they acknowledge that the current issue, the issue of base load, you must resolve. You can't have smelters without base load. Where is that base load going to come into currently and in the future? That's why just transition is assisting us to. Somebody asked about the nuclear. I spoke about strategic partners that we have are saying to us, gas, and they have defined in the global space, gas and nuclear have been defined as clean energy. It has been. And that's why we've got to be able to continue and invest in that. We have deposits, we have opportunities for utilizing that. Are we still seeing ourselves as the ANC implementing nuclear? For example, somebody yesterday was sharing the most reliable energy that we are getting currently is from Kuba, and affordable. That's what it's giving us. So it's based on evidence-taking decisions. So we can't take decisions on emotions or what we prefer and what we not prefer. What we must do away in this country is this. I was saying this even at the time I was Minister of Energy. There is fierce competition and fight against people who are championing particular technologies. And it must stop because it's at the expense of the country. It's not into the interest of the country. We have space for coal to play currently and will determine as we go towards the future. We have space for renewables to play currently into the future. And both of them, we have deposit in terms of mineral resources. We're one of the countries that have endowment of coal in the country. Some of the studies that are being done, for example, is to say, are you able to capture they're saying you can capture the emissions on air. Can we do those technologies to help us capture the air and still utilize our mineral endowment so that we don't have ghost towns? Remember, when we address this issue, we must address the value chain. It's those people that are in those communities that exist, we must reposition and say how we're going to deal with them. It's the workers, it's everybody else as we do. But again, we are one of the few countries that have access of light, of sun. Northern Cape, it's us and Chile, if I'm not mistaken, 2 countries that has the level of the sun that we have in Northern Cape and in Chile. Now we can utilize that to our advantage in terms of solar plants. Now, it doesn't mean when you say you want to have renewables, you say no to coal. Alternative technology must be utilized. So this competition must literally cease. That's why we're talking about an IRP that is transparent in modeling, that gives effect to everybody. Overall, if we are to tell the truth, all of them are just business people selling energy to the country. That's the bottom line. Everybody. And they are competing to sell. Now, there is no need to compete to the detriment of the other. The pie is big enough for everybody to have a share. And that's what we are saying from ANC point of view. Now, because this is becoming contagious and is becoming to the detriment of this country. We've got to keep the lights on. For the economy to survive, gender-based violence, women are saying we can't walk at night because the street lights are off during load shedding, we get raped. We want the lights on. That's what we are saying. So we are not contradictory on the issues of energy. We're not blaming coal stations, but the issue here, and one of the things I loved about yesterday, it was said by experts, that over time, these plants can still assist us. We just need to take a decision to say, can they function optimally to give us the megawatts that we need to keep the lights on? And as I say, we have a document, a framework of energy transition, just energy transition. We'll transmit to that point and also make sure that we don't leave, and one of the things is that let's not leave people behind. The previously disadvantaged, make sure that young people can benefit, get SMMEs to see, let's develop the technologies ourselves to be able to equip our economy. So I've really explained there in detail on the issues about energy because I thought I should deal with that. On the observation put you on network, we do think that there's been good progress that has been achieved at Netlek. For example, minimum wage has been achieved through Netlek and all others. But there are other areas where we're saying we must review. For example, we're not seeing the product of social compacting properly coming out in terms of obligations. It's almost like the state must do this. Everybody expects the state. No other social partners are coming properly into commitments. The people who sit there as well, we think that it must be decision makers at that point, so that we are immediately able to have decisions and hold each other accountable. And that's what we are calling for. So that this social compacting can be meaningful and can give us results. We are not renegating our responsibilities on this as the state on financial sector. I did explain the role, why we're talking about PSC. We are looking at holistic areas while we're doing the legislation, the other issues, but we are saying there are institutions, DFIs, that can help us to achieve this. On the State Bank, we are saying, I thought Comrade Kumbutso spoke about it in detail, when she said that they are almost done with that in terms of State Bank. But the view of conference, and many of us, is that when we say State Bank, we don't talk about one. For example, at Human Settlements, we're talking about Human Settlement Development Bank. That is supposed to assist us to crowd in private sector investment and also government investment in terms of expanding your social housing opportunities in the country, affordable housing, so that we start reducing the issue of dependency on the state in terms of provision for housing. So we are saying this resolution remains as ANC critical for development and also ensuring that it can be a catalyst for development in terms of various sectors. I think the issue, Gavin, I'll come back with the last one will be the land, just to go into detail, just closing on the energy, because I've dealt with quite a number of energy issues. On the transmission line, you'd see that we've built quite a lot in Northern Cape, but for that to connect to the grid, the transmission lines are not sufficient. So we're talking about transmission line from renewables so that they can access the grid, and you are able to get the sources. When you source the energy, you are able to transmit into household and to connect to our grid. So that's what we mean. Currently, there is a need for huge investment in that area, which we're saying that government must pay attention into that. As we build new plant, there must be the issue of transmission lines. For gas, yes, we do believe, but remember, some of the old power stations, the intention to say that as they are decommissioned, they will be repurposed to be able to become, for example, one of the, I'll remember the name of the one that has already been determined that it will become a gas plant. So that already, because it's got a transmission line, you don't have to put a new transmission line. So that's one of the things that we are looking into. Fossil fuel, obviously, we're not building new plants there, so already they are already connected to the grid. There's no need for us to do new transmission lines. But remember, over time, government, especially even in SADC, has always had this vision of building transmission lines even across the region, between the Moziza lines, Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, Zambia, all those things. So the transmission lines are in that context, all of them. What does it mean about leveraging on BRICS? It means that there is a reason why we joined BRICS. We joined BRICS to be able to have partnership between ourselves and the countries that we are working together. That's why even, for example, the BRICS Development Bank was established for access of capital so that we can have projects that are in the pipeline. So we are saying, currently our problems are in the energy space. Are we able to leverage on the BRICS partners to be able to help us to build capacity, to learn from them how they are doing that, how they are developing, how they became where they are. For example, there's nothing wrong to learn from Russia as one of the major supplier of gas in Europe. We are not experienced to that extent as a country within the gas space. That could be one of the areas that we learn. We do exchange notes, research and development. We have hubs of BRICS for R&D, and that's what we are emphasizing as conference. By the way, this year we are chair of BRICS, and we said we must utilize it to our advantage so that there are legacies that are left from our chairship as South Africa on the BRICS thing, on the BRICS alliance and BRICS partnership. Now, SA losing competitive advantage, you call for the or the electric car. Look, the issue here is that it was one of the observations that we take good decisions in time, but our implementation takes longer and we find ourselves lagging. Not necessarily that conference was saying go and revive Jewel, but it was saying that can we create a conducive environment, both in terms of incentives, but also for us to participate. We are worried about the current capacity in manufacturing that is there of cars that we currently exporting. Now, if Europe takes a decision that they are not going to accept or buy from us by 2030, now it means that those people who are employed, that manufacturing capacity that we have built, those plants that we have will become white elephants, for example. So how do we reposition and repurpose those plants to be able to play in the sector? That's what we are raising, so that we don't lose out more than anything. On the military veterans, we didn't specify whether the apartheid ones or what. What was made is that you currently have, it's dealing away with the perpetual, the burden on the state more than anything. So we are saying the state must look at the modalities, how it's going to do this. Morally, it might seem immoral to go and say the apartheid military veterans who tortured many of us to go and benefit. Morally, it might not seem correct. And will it be seen fair if you go to Constitutional Court because you're separating the previous military veterans to the current? I think the state can deal with the modalities. But what it was raised as a principle is to say you do have currently military veterans, especially those of the liberation movement, living like paupers. It's not correct. And that's the main issue that we are focused on. How the modalities and the legal framework is done by government, they will have to ensure that it's compliant. But what we do not want to see is former liberation military veterans sleeping under the bridges because they can't find a way of making a living in this country. So that's the context of the discussions that was there. I think I've answered. Okay, then coming to, I want to finish off completely on the, okay. Then on the issue of land, coming back to that one, maybe I must remember how you phrased it because I want to.
The land, you're calling for the initiation of a land redistribution bill that will allow the state to access agricultural land.
Oh yeah.
Is it for farm?
Okay. Yeah, the issue here, more than anything, what we are raising on the redistribution bill, we are saying, currently, obviously, you know that the state does get land in terms of giving to other beneficiaries. There are people who are sitting with the land that has been given for production purposes, agriculture. But it's currently, there's some lessons that are coming out of there. For example, lease of 28 years is not ownership immediately. You find that the first batch that was given, I think Comrade Togo was then the minister at beginning, quite a number of women who were given the land distribution to develop, but it was not ownership. So we are saying there is a gap in terms of ownership for that. Currently it's being done, but there are gaps in terms of enforcement and ensuring that it is sustainable. I hope I'm answering correctly. So it's for sustainability purposes and closing the current gap that exists in what we are already doing, because there isn't a legal framework or a law that allows for that to happen over time. So for fast tracking of currently what government is giving land to previously disadvantaged individuals for production and agricultural purposes, is that there is a gap that exists in terms of law for it to be sustainable. Thanks.
Okay. No, thanks very much, Mamologo. Yeah, we can. Then we're taking IR.
The last one.
All right. Yeah.
You should have come
You. So Hogaro Emela Lutula Shalafas. So was I just before we